Okay, it is 6:00 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northern Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is being held in person at the Weber County Commission chambers. It is also being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today. We encourage those who want to express their opinion to fill out a comment card. We'll pass that over to Jody over here, and she'll get it to us. Comments at today's meeting should be focused on the topics listed on the agenda. Unrelated comments will not be heard today and should be sent directly to DWR or RAC and board members for consideration at another time. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior facilitates efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated, and those who engage in it will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent, and if you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside. And as the meeting concludes, or as we have to leave tonight, we ask that everybody exit out the front doors to the west on the building here. Thank you. All right. Let's get started with RAC introductions. We'll start over here with Darren this time.
Darren Perry, Shoshone Nation. Darren, some watchable wildlife.
Ross Worthington, Public at Large.
Brandon Zundel, Public at Large.
Steve Sorensen, Sportsman's Rep.
Avery Cook, Forest Service.
Ryan Brown, Public at Large.
Rob Dale, Public at Large.
James Carlson at Large.
Wyatt Selman, Agriculture.
Jessica Wade, Bureau of Land Management.
We also have one online, Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter Stallings, Agriculture.
And I'm Brad Buchanan, also representing Sportsman. Okay, we do want to recognize Wildlife Board members. We have one in attendance here tonight with Justin Oliver, and online we have Gary Nielsen, Paula Richmond, and Kent Johnson. We do want to welcome the DWR staff, specifically those that provide presentations and are available to answer questions throughout the meeting. We have a bit of a list tonight. Heather Talley, Darren DeBloy, Chad Wilson, Chelsea Duke, Daniel Olson, Craig Walker, Melissa Early, and Brad Hunt. All right. Want to welcome the public that are attending in person and watching on YouTube. Those that are attending in person will have opportunity to provide comments regarding any agenda item. You'll fill out the public comment card and get that passed over here to Jody. Individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. If you're representing an organization or a group, you'll be given 5 minutes. And okay. All right, with that, let's start off with the approval of the agenda and the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda and the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Ryan, second by Ross to approve the agenda and the minutes from the last meeting. Any discussion? Okay, let's call for a vote with a raise of hands. Okay, motion passes unanimous. Thank you. All right, our last Wildlife Board meeting, which wasn't that long ago. Not all that prepared. Okay. The first motion was to ask the division to look at reclassifying the Oak Creek Deer Unit to a premium unit during the mid-plan review. That was to be added to the action log, and that passed unanimously. We had a motion to approve the deer permit recommendations for 2026 as presented, and that passed unanimously. On once-in-a-lifetime permit recommendations, the motion to accept the recommendations as presented by the division with the addition of an archery bison permit on the Book Cliffs Little Creek and Bitter Creek archery hunts, and that passed 4-2. Bull elk permit recommendations, the motion was to accept the recommendations as presented by the division. That passed unanimously. Longhorn permit recommendations. The motion was to accept the recommendations as presented. That passed unanimously. For the antlerless permit recommendations, we had a motion to reduce the antlerless moose permits on the Wasatch Mountains Salt Lake Timpanogos unit to 2 permits and the Morgan South Rich unit to 8 permits, 1 removed from each weapon type. And that passed 5-1. Sorry, that was the original motion. I apologize. The amended motion was to reduce the Morgan unit from 8 permits to 5, allowing 3 any legal weapon, 2 archery. And that passed 5-1. And had an additional motion to approve the remainder of the antlerless permit recommendations as presented. There was an amendment to that to increase the antlerless elk permits on the Monroe from 40 to 60. That passed unanimously. And also had another motion on antlerless, was to allow a non-resident to apply for 1 antlerless moose permit on the Morgan South Rich unit. That passed unanimously. For CWMU antlerless permit recommendations, the motion was to accept the recommendation as presented by the division, with the exception on Deseret, the antlerless moose was reduced by 1 public and 1 private permit. That passed 4 in favor with 2 recusals. And for the aquatic rule amendments, the motion was to accept the amendments as presented by the division. That passed unanimously. Any questions from the last board meeting? Okay. Let's go to regional update from Blair.
Okay, so it's been a little while since we've done an update, so just kind of run through and talk about some of the major things we're doing here in the region that have been going on for last month or 2 and will be in next month or 2. Wait real quick for this to come up. So if not, I'll just give a quick update. Okay. Looks like our internet's working, so I wonder if that's part of the problem. Okay. All right. I'll just go through and hit just a couple of things that we've got going on. Couple of reminders. So our buck bull once in a lifetime application period has closed. We've got a couple more weeks before those updates are announced. So I believe it's May 30th. So you probably don't need to worry about checking your credit cards yet, but I'm sure if you're anxious, you can start doing that, but it'll probably be a couple more weeks before you see anything. Also, our antlerless application period will be opening up. That's going to be on June 9th. So a couple more weeks. That one will be available as well for anybody who wants to apply. We also had just one update we wanted to talk about, and that is the harvest surveys. We had a lot of feedback from upset customers who weren't aware that was mandatory this year for big game. It's really valuable data for us. So just keep in mind that after your hunt's over, just go in and complete that survey. It's really quick to do, and it provides really excellent data for us to be able to do a lot of our hunt recommendations and permit numbers and everything else we do. So keep that in mind for your future hunts, and don't forget to do it. We had a really excellent archery clinic that went on a couple weeks ago up at Hardware Ranch, and we had great participation. A lot of our partners helped with that event, a lot of volunteers. So we appreciate everyone who participated in that as well. Our aquatics team's been really busy doing a lot of stuff around the region. We've been having quite a few gill netting projects going on. We collected eggs at Willard Bay and saw a lot of great fish up there. And we have some electroshocking projects going on around the region. So our aquatic staff work really hard and do a lot of great things. So they'll be busy doing those things for the next couple of months as well. In the wildlife section, we have quite a few surveys going on. We're doing lamb surveys right now and out on Antelope Island. And we also have some bat surveys going on. We've had a few changes as well in that program. There we are. Sweet. Okay, Mike, if you want to go keep skipping through a couple slides. Go to the wildlife one. There we go. Okay. We're also doing sharp-tail and sage-grouse counts. Those just wrapped up. Overall, we're seeing those numbers down a little bit from where they were last year, but still some birds out there. I wanted to talk a little bit about deer survival as well. This was probably one of the best years we've had survival in ever since we've been collaring deer. Almost all of our adults survived across the region, as well as quite a few of the fawns. What that means for hunters is we're going to see a big uptick in the deer population. We started seeing that last year, and it'll continue this year. There should be a lot of yearlings out there, a lot of small bucks. You'll see a lot of yearling does, a lot of fawns again. So it's a good sign, and we'll start seeing a lot more deer out there on the landscape. Next slide. Wanted to hit on our CWD study as well. We've been doing this last winter. We've been catching deer down in Weber Davis counties as well as Salt Lake County. Probably one of the things that we're learning pretty quickly is we've got a lot of CWD hotspots out there in that bountiful area. You can see on the map, there's a lot of red dots there. It is quite concerning because there's a lot of deer in that area. We haven't seen a lot of major movements coming from those deer going back up in elevation as the snow melts. That's a good sign, but it does concern us because there are a lot of positives in that area. Some of the cool things we're seeing in Cache Valley, we've collared 10 deer along the east side of Cache Valley. We're seeing some pretty big movements from those deer. We kind of assumed a lot of those were urban animals, but we're seeing some of them go way back up on the cache. One in particular was collared around the Providence area, and now it's up by Temple Fork. So pretty significant movements and no impacts or animals with CWD to this point. So that's a great sign. Next slide. Want to hit on two vacancies as well. Adam Brewerton, who is our conservation biologist here in the region, he's moved to our Salt Lake office and is now our avian species coordinator. So we'll be filling in behind him in the coming months, and that job is currently open right now. And we also have John Luff. He was our Great Salt Lake Ecosystem program. He was moving to Salt Lake to be our Great Salt Lake coordinator. So he's going to be working at a higher level now, working on a lot of lake-wide issues and overseeing the brine shrimp program as well. So we appreciate those two individuals and looking forward to the new things that will be coming from the new people when we get them in place. Our habitat section's been really busy doing a lot of different plannings on a bunch of different WMAs. There's a picture of one right here that we visited with the Mule Deer Committee a couple weeks ago on Millville, Providence. We've also been doing some upland plannings on our Richmond WMA in April with a group of dedicated hunters. Yeah, just a quick picture of what some of these plantings look like. This one's where we've gone and we've scalped the soil back and put in some of these rootstock on the left and starting to see some response from plants there on the right. Next slide. Also want to talk a little bit about the beaver work going on in the region. We've been doing some translocations in the Weber River drainage as well as up on the cache. We see a huge benefit by putting beavers back on the landscape. They are great for our watersheds. They really help to saturate our soils, increase wild herbaceous plant communities, and so we continue to use them. One cool story this last Friday, we took some back in a couple miles and our biologist ended up having to carry one for about 1.5 miles before we got it back to where we were releasing it. So it's a big intensive effort, but a really cool project and hope to see some great things coming from those relocations. I wanted to also hit on our deer meeting. So we held a big meeting with anybody who wanted to attend last August to talk about mule deer in the region. Since then, we've been meeting with two small groups, one in the northern part of the region and one in the southern part, just talking overall about deer, some of the challenges, talking about populations, talking about some opportunities that we can do in the future. We've been getting a lot of momentum with those groups. We just wrapped up a field tour and a meeting with our north group. We have some coming up with our South groups. We've got a field tour coming up on the 20th, and then a meeting on the 3rd, and then our North group will meet again on the 13th. So a lot of great things happening with mule deer in the region. If you want to learn more, we've got this QR code here you can scan. It takes you to a page that shows you a lot of the data that we have, as well as other things we're going on across the state with mule deer. Next slide. That's all we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Blair. Anyone have any questions for Blair about all that? All right. Okay, we'll we'll move to agenda item number 5, upland game recommendations with Heather Talley.
Thank you.
Welcome, Heather. I guess a brief recap or any highlights or changes or corrections for us tonight?
Sure. So just a few minor tweaks to the taking wild turkey rule, including mandatory harvest reporting. And so we also had to update that in the assessment of late fees rule. Then with some of our depredation rule changes, we did want to offer some monetary compensation for certain situations, offer nuisance hunter pole hunts in addition to depredation hunter pole hunts, and then increase control permits that are the free landowner permits from 2 to 5, and remove the language that prohibits selling of vouchers and charging of access fees for those depredation control permit vouchers, and allow multiple landowners to hunt each other's adjacent properties with permits and vouchers. And this was already vaguely in the rule, but we just added some verbiage to clarify it further. And then finally, just adding turkey to the urban deer rule.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's start off with any questions from RAC members.
We're on the upland game, not the turkey, right?
Yes, it is the upland game recommendations.
Sorry, I did the turkey.
Yeah.
I apologize. Thanks, Brandon.
We're ready for the next agenda item too. So.
Oh, just loving the turkeys so much. We just have one change for upland game. Everything's staying the same as you saw from the presentation, except in the pen reared possession and release rule. We just recommend to remove the quarter-mile buffer between CHAs and our waterfowl and wildlife management areas, since we reviewed that rule and didn't think that provision was needed. So just other minor tweaks and clarifications, but no other changes to upland game.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Brandon. All right.
I've got
Any-
a question.
yeah.
Why did we have a buffer in there before?
Historically, I think that it could have been some trying to buffer some disease issues, but now we have so much disease testing requirements that we no longer feel that that's necessary. And it could have just been to try to separate some of our pen-reared birds from wild populations, but they just seem to cross those boundaries, you know?
Any other questions from RAC members? Okay, any questions from the public? Okay, summarize public comment on this one.
All right, so we had one public comment on this agenda item. That person didn't agree with upland game hunting. It said because of low population numbers. And then I wasn't quite sure what to infer from that. But.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have one public comment card on this agenda item. Angie Wanacott.
Hi, I'm Angie Wanacott representing Sportsman's Proficient Wildlife, and we just want you guys to know that we support the division's recommendation.
Thanks, Angie. All right, we'll bring it back for RAC discussion. Or entertain a motion.
Make a motion to pass the recommendations as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Ross, seconded by Ryan to accept the upland game recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. May I raise your hands? Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimous. All right, now we're all primed for this one. Agenda item number 6, wild turkey recommendations.
Okay, well,
You don't need to repeat everything he says.
just reiterated that, so.
Okay, let's start off with any questions from RAC members.
I'll start with a stupid question. Are we currently able right now to use the electronic tagging for turkey harvest? I
Yes,
haven't been smart enough to kill one yet, so.
we all know that's not true. And yes, we do have e-tagging available.
So will
For
that,
turkeys.
will that also count for the mandatory harvest report then? If I manage to kill a bird and I e-tag it, will that count as my harvest report? Or do I need to file that separately?
I would have to defer to licensing. I believe that it does count for that, but I don't want to speak to that definitively as I haven't dug into the rule. So if anybody is here that would like to answer that from the audience, or we can get back to you after I speak with licensing.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? All right,
Oh, I had another question.
okay, go ahead.
On the couple of parts of this that are a little bit more, I guess, controversial, but did we have a committee that went over these changes? Or was this all done internally?
So what happened is we did convene a mid-plan review turkey committee to talk about the turkey plan. Independently of that, we also discussed these changes internally with that group to get a sense of where everybody's heads were at in terms of support or not support of different things, and just to have a discussion and see how those discussions went. So we didn't have a formal committee or anything, but we did discuss that, and we did have other prior to that meeting, we did have other discussions with NWTF about these changes.
How did that group of people feel about the selling of vouchers?
There was mostly opposition.
All right, want to summarize public comments?
Yep, so for this agenda item, we had one comment as well, and this person didn't agree with the recommendation. They felt like damage wasn't significant enough to be removing turkeys from population.
Okay, thank you. Got a few public comment cards on this one. Let's start off with Angie Wanacott, followed by Chuck Carpenter.
Hi, I'm Angie Wanacott representing SFW, and we just want to let you guys know that we do support the division's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Chuck Carpenter, followed by Sierra Nelson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chuck Carpenter. I represent National Wild Turkey Federation. Just want to say a lot of respect to you all. I know how much time and effort, emotional and mental capital you put into this. First, I want to say, we recognize and we support 3 of the changes that are going. We support the proposed changes to the mandatory harvest reporting. That'll give us a lot more data. It'll just be great for data collection. We also support the inclusion of turkeys in the urban deer plan. And we also support the increase of the turkey control permits from 2 to 5. That was something that landowners said that they wanted. They thought an increase in their tags would alleviate a lot of the problems. We also supported turkeys being included in the conservation agreement rule, which provides monetary compensation to landowners that are kind of feeling the burden of nuisance animals. We totally understand that's a real thing. And we want to help give tools to the division and to those landowners to mitigate that. With this being said, we strongly oppose the proposed changes to the R657-69-7. Wildlife is a public trust in Utah and should be managed for the benefit of landowners, hunters, and public, and turning it into a commodity kind of shifts that. It kind of goes against the North American model a little bit. And me, as a biologist, I'm going to look at the data. And when we look at the data, the division did survey all the landowners that had vouchers. We're not changing the number of vouchers. We're changing the number of control permits to add to that. So anybody that had them last year, they did reach out to all of them. 39% said what they were given was very helpful, solved all their problems. Another 18% said that they're moderately helpful, but they wanted a couple additional tags, which is one of the increases. And so that kind of gets us up to like 57% of respondents saying that they would feel totally good about this situation. And just for context, Utah Turkey Management Plan, we have a trigger if satisfaction for hunters is 2 out of 5. So 40% equivalent, until we actually enact any kind of change. So I think like the 57%, we're obviously not going to make everybody happy, but we're going there and adding these tools is a great thing. And really, we're adding 3 new tools to the toolbox, and we need to evaluate those tools and see if that actually solved all of our problems. When you're switching to a commodification of wildlife, that's a big step and something that should be taken with a grain of salt. So the biggest thing is we think we should just take it one step at a time, enact these 3 big changes, measure the results, then adjust. If we need to come back and reevaluate, we can. Also, one of the things of the sampled landowners, we want to promote opportunity for Utah hunters. 32% of those landowners did say that they opened up their land to hunting to just general public with over-the-counter tags. 50% said they let friends and family come and hunt their property. So that's an opportunity thing. That's kind of the like culture and foundation of hunting. And I think that if we allowed vouchers to be sold, it risks turning the conflict management into a pay-to-play opportunity. And once the voucher has a market value, we kind of start moving away from access from public hunters, neighbors, local families, and we move it into whoever can pay. And right now, we really believe the turkey control permit should be designed to solve the problem. It should be targeted harvest, conflict reduction, improved tolerance for turkeys on landscape. But once permits are able to be sold, it incentivizes a shift where it rewards the presence of those conflict animals and it incentivizes people to be intolerant of those turkeys. And I think that's the wrong direction to be taking. We want to build trust. We want to build goodwill. We want to help the landowners. We want to help hunters and reduce this conflict. And right now, I think we have a system where we kind of are mitigating that. We really need to see what happens with these new changes. And so for that reason, we suggest that we just table the R657-69-7 and the commodification of turkey tags because we really support the incremental management and see where it goes from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Sierra Nelson, followed by, I hope I say this right, Sakia White? Sakia White.
But I've been Steve in these meetings, so
That's fair.
whatever happens, you're good. I now have 5 minutes and I have a 43 slide PowerPoint, so buckle up. My name's Sierra Nelson. I represent the Utah Wool Growers Association, and I've got landowners across the state with a lot of private property. And we want to strongly support the division's recommendations on this, especially because we feel like it brings a good balance between wildlife management and private property rights. We like how this program mirrors the deer depredation program. We think, especially in a drought year like this is going to do some good things for our people. I am a failed bird hunter, and I have to tell you, I've had more than plenty of opportunity at wild turkey. They are, especially up north, my goodness, there are turkeys, and they are super destructive. I mean, on a personal note, I'm a crazy chicken lady, and my chickens are like insanely destructive, and they're like this big. I can't even imagine having a whole flock of wild turkeys on top of my private property. So we'd encourage you to support the division's recommendations, and thank you for your time. For the next 4 minutes, just kidding.
You gonna sing a solo or? All right, thank you, Sierra. Sakia White.
if I had $1 for every time my name was said right, I would only have $1. So no worries. I'm Sakia White. I represent Utah Farm Bureau Federation. And as you know, we are an organization full of private landowners. And so we strongly support the division's recommendations for wild turkeys. It's no secret that the drought we're in is extremely hard on wildlife as well as our agriculture producers. And it's a tough year and we need every inch of the land to produce. The damage that is caused by wild turkeys is a great burden to producers across the state, and we feel like this recommendation allows for relief to the producers that has not been there in the past. It mirrors the deer depredation program that's been an excellent tool for our producers. And we really feel like the ability to sell vouchers is important because it offers the landowners financial compensation and to help force the turkeys from being accustomed to the long-term use of private property. Ultimately, like oil growers, we really feel like this is a good thing because it's a better balance between wildlife management and private property rights. So thank you very much for your work and consideration on this.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the public comments cards that we have for this agenda item. So we'll bring it back for RAC discussion.
Forgive me for betraying my ignorance, but are vouchers for other species allowed to be sold?
Yes, for big game. And to that end, I would like to make a quick clarification as well, if that's allowed.
Yep.
Something that I am remiss in not putting this in the RAC packet because this is something that we don't need to clarify and rule because we can just do this internally. If the sale of vouchers were to pass through this process, we would no longer just be issuing either sex vouchers. And that would drastically curtail the concern of just trying to harbor turkeys on your land and just trying to use them to make money rather than continuing to alleviate a damage issue, because we would be either issuing all or mostly hen permits.
Thank you for that.
Kind of going back to Chuck's comment and I guess the original intent of the rule is trying not to give people the incentive to have problems, which is I think why I couldn't sell them in the original proposal. Maybe this is more of a question for some of the big game or depredation people, but have we seen that in big game where people are creating problems to get tags to sell?
Not that I'm aware of. I will let big game representatives speak to that.
Jim Christensen, Northern Region Wildlife Manager. So in my time, I've only seen one landowner actually do that. That we go in, try and solve the problem. He didn't want the problem solved because he wanted the money that come from the vouchers. And we've dealt with hundreds. So.
Sorry to bounce around, but I did want to really quick address the e-tagging. Yes, it would fulfill. We got the word back that it does fulfill your harvest report. And something else to keep in mind is that essentially the voucher is given to somebody as access to their property. And we want people to be able to charge access fees for their own private property. So that's part of where this is coming from, is it wouldn't make sense to discern between the two because it's essentially just allowing them access. The voucher is useless unless people can access the property for harvest.
Thank you.
If I may, we've never done it on our own private property to get vouchers this way, but if it's like everything else, these areas need to be assessed first before they're awarded vouchers, right? So, I mean, I can see the concern being maybe there'd be an influx all of a sudden of private property owners wanting to get vouchers to be able to sell them, but they still have to be assessed individually, correct?
They do. And so that would go into whether they're getting beardless or either sex permits or, if any either sex permits, because they would have to go out, count the number of offending animals. They can get vouchers for up to 10% or a maximum of 15 vouchers for those offending animals.
Okay. For me, I mean, if the vouchers are given and those birds are going to be taken either way, if the landowner can charge for access to do that, it's still a control tool, not a monetary tool, in my opinion.
Heather, would this help disperse turkeys onto public off of private? Is there a problem?
That's the hope. We're hoping with all of these tools that we can either remove the offending animals or disperse them back on the public.
Thank you.
To make sure I understand, so as it currently stands, a property owner can charge access to their land, but not for the voucher. And with this, that selling the voucher kind of replaces the charging money for access to their land.
Right now, they can neither charge access or sell a voucher in the current turkey depredation rule. So we just opted to remove that language for this recommendation.
Is there a limit on what they can sell them for?
Not to my knowledge, we don't have any kind of limitation set.
Still, when you go into assess the property, is the option still presented to the landowner to have the turkeys trapped and removed from the property rather than hunted?
It's a great question, because even though we're offering all of these different tools, we are still very focused and hold trapping as a very high priority. So it doesn't mean that we won't trap. If landowners are willing to let us trap and they want that to happen in conjunction with vouchers and with permits and other things, we just want to give them more tools. But sometimes, like in winters where there's no snow, it's really difficult to get turkeys to go into one of those walk-in traps. So.
Okay.
Is there an acreage requirement for this, or is it just strictly off of animals on the property?
Strictly off of animals on the property. And to that end, are you kind of getting at the collection of landowners being able to hunt each other's property? Is that where that's going from? I actually put together a table today because I do feel like there is some confusion between the LOA program, CWMU program, and what this offers. So if you're okay with that, I'd like to share that with you guys. Let me see if I can resize that screen just a little bit to make that easier to see. Okay. So we can go over this. Also, everybody saw last night, I love to defer to Darren on these private lands, public wildlife programs, but landowner associations, the intent is providing hunting opportunities to landowners and recognition of benefits in their private properties to provide wildlife. Cooperative wildlife management units intent is to provide income to landowners, provide increased public hunting access, provide protection for landowners who allow public access. And then with our turkey control permit vouchers, it's just to remove offending animals from private property and solving a conflict issue by dispersing those individuals. So this also shows that landowner associations and CMMUs, those are for, bucks, bulls, bearded turkeys, all this kind of thing. Our control permits will be mostly beardless. We don't want to take away the either sex option completely in case there are some issues where there's a big group of toms causing a lot of damage on a property. So we don't want to take away any tools, but we do, with those assessments, our depredation team will offer mostly hen permits. So again, the total amount of vouchers are issued are 10% of the offending animals with a maximum of 15. And right now it is either sex, but if the permits or the vouchers can be sold, we will change that internally. So just looking at this, are there any clarifications? I mean, there's no acreage requirements. There's not really like these high dollar tags that exist in these other properties or other programs, excuse me.
I think previously there was that buffer area around the area defined like in the depredation plan for turkeys, the division could include some buffer area, like to cover roost areas or wherever to make it more viable, I guess, for the hunting. Is that buffer area still included if you've got the group of landowners, or is it strictly on their?
Yes, so
Ceded
that
property.
is, so we do still have all the buffer language as it stated before, and that would allow, if landowners are adjacent, it already allowed landowners to allow others to hunt the property by including their land in a buffer. And this would be, buffers could be a possibility, but most of the time, this would be mostly restricted to private lands. It would have to be an interesting situation. I know that with Enterprise, for example, there's a lot of patchwork of public-private, and they'll be, roosting on private and then during shooting hours, not there, but causing a lot of damage at night. So we recognize that that's an issue as well.
For the landowners that are hunting their adjacent properties, they have to sign up as a group
They do.
for those. And so those are separate from the vouchers that might be sold.
No. So let's say an individual landowner A and landowner B have adjoining properties adjacent to each other, but they're separate entities. And each of them have 5 turkeys on their property. That would be, let's say they each have 100, so we can use the 10% as a round number. But if that's the case, then they each would get 10 vouchers. If they're together, they're still each getting the same number of vouchers. It doesn't change the number of vouchers that they're getting. It doesn't change their availability to let the public hunt, because it's always been private property. They've always had control over that. It's simply allowing for us to better disperse turkeys, to Steve's point of getting them off private property completely instead of moving from one landowner to another.
So if a member of the public were to purchase one of these, I guess there'd be 20 tags in your example.
It's a maximum of 15 total.
But
So
if
if
they're separate landowners, so when they come together, even though separately they'd get 20, now that they've come together so they can hunt both properties, now they're limited to the 15.
Right.
So, but if a member of the public were to purchase one of those vouchers, he could hunt both properties.
Right.
Okay.
And it's up to the landowners to give that to them. It's not like an over-the-counter situation. The
Right.
landowners would have the vouchers in their possession and give them to who they want.
Heather, do you see these beardless vouchers going for very much?
I don't know if anybody else has a different sentiment. The vouchers themselves have a cost to turn them into a permit of the price of a permit, but I don't think that landowners are going to, make an astronomical amount of money off of beardless permits.
So on the voucher, would it list both property owners in the situation you were like adjoining, it'd say good for property owner A and B?
I'm not sure how the vouchers are listed, and I know that the Northern region has already done this with big game a number of times. So the mechanics we're just emulating from the big game program. We could definitely ask the Northern region that question and see what they would like to say. We'll stop sharing really quick.
Randall McBride, urban wildlife biologist for the Northern region. I'm over depredation and nuisance. So with big game, when they come together, they have to create a name and a map for their depredation association. And then that's how we listed on the permit, is it's for this association specifically, and those properties enrolled, they have to create that map and line them out specifically. So.
Okay, any other discussion from RAC members?
One final note of concern, I guess, that was brought to my attention by the public was a gentleman mentioned that he's asked repeatedly how many depredation turkey tags have been given out and what sex and all that, and never gotten an answer. And is that something they have to grandma request, or is it, if this moves forward, would the public be able to request how many beardless and how many bearded turkey permits did we give out as part of the depredation in this area?
That's interesting. I have not personally received that request to my knowledge, so maybe it's just a matter of a communication barrier. We actually have a mitigation survey as a result of our 2023 planning effort with the turkey management plan. We decided we wanted to do harvest surveys for the mitigation permits as well. And so we do have a couple of years of that data, and I don't know that it's part of the harvest report, but they could definitely talk about grandma requesting some of that so we can redact landowner information from it.
Is that something that could be summarized and put in the harvest report?
I believe so. I would think that it should be, that we could definitely do that. So I can definitely look into that for sure.
Okay, any other comments from RAC members? Yeah, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the division's proposal as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Steve, seconded by Wyatt to accept the wild turkey recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion?
I'll just say that I kind of came in here kind of thinking I was against the idea of selling vouchers on these, but especially where it's going to be primarily beardless turkeys, there's not really a trophy aspect to this at all. And also hearing from Jim that we really don't have any abusers of this program, where they're faking that they've got a turkey problem and they really don't mind having the turkeys at all because they just want the money. But I don't see this as being a money maker for somebody. So I kind of have to throw my support behind it.
Okay. Comment, go ahead.
I just had one question. Is this on a 3-year plan, or is this just indefinite until another issue comes up?
This is all recommendations for the 3-year RAC cycle. So we'll be back in 3 years to discuss any wild turkey and upland game recommendations again.
Okay. The motion is to accept as presented. We'll call for a vote. Raise your hands. Okay, motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. All right, agenda item number 7, CWMUs with public land variance requests and rule amendments with Darren DeBloy.
Hi. I have a couple of things. One, I just wanted to kind of give the RAC a feel for the order of operations on this stuff, you know, how this happens. CWUs have to renew their certificate of registration every 3 years. And so it's kind of a staggered process. This is actually our big year, which is why there's so much information on this time around. And I apologize for all the homework that I put into the RAC packet. If we have, so this would be a year for a lot of people to renew. Those applications are due in August, but for CWMUs that include public land, we want to have the CWMU advisory committee look at that. And the reason is that, you know, as you probably saw from the packet, that's a 3-hour meeting where they dive into the details on every single one of these. And so, so they have an opportunity to look at that and make a recommendation to the board. They looked at all of these during that meeting. They recommended they all, with some caveats, but they pretty much recommended that they all go forward. And so that's where we are now. And so we just wanted to make sure that you all have a chance to look at this, and if you've got any questions to raise them. And then I've got one correction. Sam called me this morning and there was an error in the original presentation slide for Green Canyon, which is CWMU up Blacksmith Fork up in Cache Valley. The change there, the public acres was wrong on the presentation. I think it said 180 public acres. They're actually taking the Forest Service ground along Blacksmith Fork out of the CWMU. So the only public acres in that CWMU would be that little 40 that's up landlocked on the forest. I think the map might have been wrong too. So just to clarify that, they're still going to offer trade lands north of the highway. but they will be retaining that additional permit that they used to give to the public. So that's really the only note I have on this. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll start off with any questions from RAC members.
Darren, why are they removing the forest on that CWU?
I don't, I wish Sam was here. I'm not sure that I ever heard a good,
That's fine.
I just heard a reason other than
Backyard,
just, they just didn't want to have it in anymore. I mean, it does, that gives them another buck tag that they can sell. So that might be. part of it.
Gotcha.
Any reasons for having public land in there on your slides? And I apologize, I should have written it down, but there's 3 reasons.
Right.
One's a discernible boundary, one is it's landlocked, and then there's a third reason, and you mentioned it and said that it's hardly ever used.
Yeah.
But when I went through your slides, there was like 8 of them that
Yeah, I guess it
third one
depends on
was
how you
used.
define it. It's
So I'm
in order
curious,
to,
I can't remember what it's called.
it's in order to attain a management objective.
Okay, management objective. That's
And
what it
so
was.
in some cases, consolidating the hunt boundary could be, if it ever is used, it's sort of a third order. It's used third order reason. It's not ever usually used on its own. I guess that's just probably how I should have stated to be more clear. So it might have been included in a list of reasons, but it's generally not the reason. Most of the time it's either because the property, the public land is landlocked, there's no public access to it, or it's to try to draw a boundary that the public can identify, a fence line, a ridge line, a road.
Most of these made sense along those 3, but I was curious if you could talk about the Old Woman Plateau. It seems like there's a large chunk of forest that's accessible from the north to the south and the east. Why that is included?
Trying to rack my memory of what we talked about in our long meeting. Let me pull that up. I think, Avery, my memory on that one is, this is one of those CWUs that's been part of the program forever. It looks like, looking at the map, and I can pull the map up if the RAC would like me to. It would probably push them below the acreage, at least historically, to be able to be a CWMU. If they would cut that out, it wouldn't be contiguous anymore with some of the other property. And so I suspect in the past, in order to get to that 5,000 acre level, if I remember right, in the CW Advisory Committee meeting, Vance indicated that with the new rule where if you have 90% of the property, you could still be eligible, they probably still qualify if that was not included. Their concession is to give up some private land on that in similar habitat up high for public access in trade lands. So that's how that one's working. But so it's a little bit of both. It's probably just, it's been that way forever. And but with it, that's why we review them. So you can take a look at them.
I've got 2 questions. If I can ask them. Darren, how many CWMUs are currently not at the cow objective that the division would like to see?
It's going to be tough for me to give you a number. I can give you some units. Most the ones in Morgan South Rich would be in an over objective unit. Is that it up here? I don't think there's any East Canyon. Yeah, so if they're in those units, that they would be under those, Hunter. I don't believe the other parts of the state that are in that situation.
Are all the units in those 2 regions? Are all of them, participating in the emergency, I guess, program to offer antlerless permits to their private hunters as well, or is that only some of the units? That are using that.
We had some specific CWMUs that we recommended that for a couple of years ago and again this year. And when we went to the board with that recommendation in the fall, we asked that the division could just moving forward, we could just do this administratively. So if we get CWMUs in that situation, the biologist can just make that recommendation. So for now, I think there's 4 or 5 CWMUs that can offer second doe tag, et cetera. But if they're in an over objective unit now, they would all be potentially able to qualify for that. And then that's a discussion with between the biologist and the operator, if that makes sense for them. But we do definitely want to see that harvest. So it's working pretty well in the situations where we applied it.
Darren?
Yeah.
So part of the verbiage in that, in your proposal was to, some of the CWMUs didn't need to report in extenuating circumstances.
Right. Yeah. For the rule.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Is that hard? Is that a hard thing for them to do or?
No. This would be subject to director approval, so you'd have to go right to the top. We've had one cycle of this where anybody that's on an over objective unit and meets certain criteria would need to come to the advisory board and report as to why they're not making it. We met once last fall in that capacity. We found that there were some CWMUs that really were doing the best that they could, and there was some circumstance one way or the other. And the biologists were comfortable that they were still going to be on track, and they were happy, and so they came to the committee and explained that. So that would still happen. What we wanted to do is make sure that was an option and rule, that basically what we did in practice would be covered by rule. So if the biologist doesn't agree that they're doing what they need to do, we won't ask for that. No, they'll definitely need to come. And if they do, like this winter, our CWMUs work their guts out to get that cow harvest with no snow. And sometimes it wasn't just the snow was there, but it was mud. And they're really struggling with getting roads torn up and so forth. And really put in a lot of effort to try to do that. And I think overall we really did get harvest. But that might be a situation where we could come to the advisory committee and say, these CWMUs really worked with us, but because of the winter that they had, they didn't quite meet their objectives. And so here's what we'll do to try and move forward and make sure that happens. So that's all we're talking about doing.
So Darren, on that topic, I know in the rule committee, this was one of the points that we really hammered on was accountability measures that, frankly, kind of, I'll say it this way, kept the biologist out of being a person in the middle and took it to the board and just, I'll say it.
Yeah.
It seems like now we're going away from that and just taking it back to the division with that. Is this trying to write it in as an option, or is this now the direction we want to go?
This is an option. So again, if for some reason we feel like we can explain this to the committee and we don't need the CW to be there because they really did make an effort, we could get director approval to do that. The committee will still hear it. They'll still hear what's going on. So it's not the biologist going and saying, well, you got to come and you don't. It's more just, we'll look at everything and there'll be a list that we'll submit to the director and say, and they can still come if they want to. And I'd encourage them to be there. I think it's good for the CWs to come in. And it's good for the advisory committee to hear some of the struggles and the hard work that folks are putting in. So we'd still encourage it, but it wouldn't be mandatory, if they're really, really trying.
So when you say we would hear it, would be, I guess, who's going to hear it and then take it to the director for approval, or is the director just having to make this decision?
That wouldn't be a conversation they necessarily had to have with the CWMU. If you're talking about putting a biologist in a hard situation, I don't think our biologists are used to being in hard positions, in hard situations. That's nothing new, but it doesn't put I don't think an undue pressure. It's more of a default. You're coming unless we agree that you put forth a good faith effort. In that case, we can make it optional and we can definitely come and represent what the situation is. So, and that's what we did in practice last year, and that seemed to work pretty well.
How many so we only went through one cycle. How many had to come before this advisory board?
It would have been, it was virtually all of them that are in those units. So, and the catch-all was there's one criteria that sort of catches them all. And I can't remember off the top of my head. I could look, but yeah, there are quite a few of them that had to come in, and and quite a few of them too, that we felt like, well, you know, we feel like they're doing what they can. But the rule basically says you're coming, and that wasn't always necessary in every case. So this gives us an option to waive it. Again, the committee will still hear that they didn't make it, and this is why. But it usually will be the biologist explaining that.
So would it be an option if the committee hears the division's reasoning and is happy that they could call the CWMU in?
Right. Yeah, they could. And we did run these potential rule changes by the advisory committee, and they were supportive of tweaking this this way. They felt like that was a good change. So, and they did. I think Mike Christensen mentioned the concern about putting biologists in the hot seat. We don't want to abuse our biologists too much, but they're pretty good at crucial conversations for the most part. So.
Do you have a question?
I was just going to talk about the discernible boundary thing. I feel like I know that there's the trade land and stuff that goes on, but I feel like if there's a Forest Service or BLM land that's accessible from BLM or Forest Service, you guys make a discernible boundary and insert that into a CWMU for deer, elk, or whatever's in the CWMU, but people can come back and grouse hunt or rabbit hunt.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of contradicts like not letting people go in and deer hunt and elk hunt. And I wonder how come, is that the case?
I guess I would say overall, we try to avoid including public land in CWMUs ever. And so as a general rule, if there isn't a compelling reason to do it, we recommend against it. There are situations where and you know, I've heard about, you know, there's onyx and people ought to know where they are and all of that. And so, and maybe we're heading that direction, but sometimes there's a really clear fence line or something like that makes it easy to post. And then it's really clear. And it's helpful if you think a CWMU is just a hunt boundary like any other boundary. You need a particular permit in order to hunt within that boundary. So public land is not locked up for the CWMU use. It's just, if you want to hunt that public land, then you need that CWMU tag for those seasons. And again, so we try to avoid it. And if there's one in particular that you've got a concern about, I'm sure we could talk about it. But I just
Old
Can we pull that one up?
in Box Elder.
I'm having a hard time understanding that old woman and the justification on that.
Just a second, just like get on here. Turn off now. Okay, I think I solved that problem. Let's see what the next one I can occur. I hope that this is going to be legible. It's hard to cram everything on a slide, but let's see. Okay, let me. I don't think I can zoom in. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Well enough? So there's that big piece of Forest Service that sort of runs down the eastern side of that CWMU, and I think, you know, the best explanation I can give is that in the past this was allowed. This is an old CWMU. So again, this is a grandfather situation, and you know, the RACs. This isn't quite what I'm talking about with discernible boundaries. This is more of a different philosophy in the past. And it looks like I'm getting a text. So let's see advances.
That's the trade lands. So like, why are we
doing
more of this?
Yeah, this is all. Like if they want to give that whole southern piece.
I just think my concern with it is I've heard from a few people that they feel like if you can go in there and hunt other species, you should be smart enough to go in there. Like deer hunt, elk hunter should be smart enough to find the boundaries as well.
I think in this case in particular, I think that's a fairly strong argument. That's a kind of a big contiguous piece of forest.
Yeah.
So
Northern
again,
Utah is just a rough one because 93 or
Checkerboard.
4% private, and
Yeah.
we keep
Yeah.
adding.
So
yours.
again, the committee looked at this, they did recommend that we approve it, but the reasoning is what I said. It's just one that's been grandfathered in. And, you know, if the board decided that they didn't agree with it after the input from the RACs, then that's certainly, we'd have, that's why we do it now. So they have the summer to figure out what they're gonna do. Okay, thank you. Was there
Keep
another
the
one? in
side
Fox
conversations to a minimum, guys.
Sorry. Was there another one you all wanted to look at while I got this up, or?
I think the Green Canyon one was the other one
Okay, yeah.
that was concerning, but it sounds like that was.
Yeah, let me show you the correct map for that, just so you know. So you can see those Forest Service pieces up south of Blacksmith Fork Road, but on the north side of the CWMU, the red line goes around those, so those wouldn't be included. So the only public land that's included in that would be that little 40 that's up on top there to the south. And that's landlocked and there's no public access to it. And then there's the brown trade lands there to the north of and that, you know, that's steep country. There's some deer in there, but they're willing to keep that in. It does allow some access. If you go up through there, you can get onto the forest or some state land that way.
Okay, any other questions? Any of the units, I guess, while we have maps pull up, any other? Okay. Any questions from the public? Okay, let's summarize public comments on this one.
All right, so for this one, we had quite a few responses. We had 11 people respond, and all of those strongly agreed with the recommendation. And some of those people also commented. Generally, their comments were very positive. They thought it was a great program and one of the best in the West. A lot of people commented on having really good hunting experiences, and they commented on how this is good for landowners, hunters, wildlife. And we even had one non-resident comment and said they had a very positive experience as well.
Okay, thank you. We do not have any public comment cards on this agenda item, so open it up for RAC discussion.
I guess, sorry, on one question with that, the old woman or whatever, what's the tag allotment on that specific CWMU?
Let me look it up for you. Another thing that occurred to me as I was sitting there thinking is, you know, trade lands isn't all of it. One thing that we talked about and one thing that the committee had recommended on that one is that in the past, they hadn't offered an additional public tag. And the committee said, we'll approve it, but you have to do the math on that. So basically works out to how many tags you get, how many public acres are you including, what's your trade land offset, and then whatever the math works out, you need to offer an additional, this is a deer CWMU, so you need to offer an additional CWMU. So that, right, as it stands, that would just be, you need a CWMU deer tag to hunt that. But for all other big game species, that would still be open to the public to hunt with a regular unit tag. Let me just quickly get into my.
I don't want to speak for Darren, but I did watch the committee meeting, and I think on this one, they were adding an additional deer and additional elk permit every year.
Oh yeah, there is elk. That's right. The internet must be really slow, but let me pull that up. But go ahead and have your discussion.
That's you. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, it would be an additional one, and that again, they said if we're going to pass this, you need to do that moving forward.
So acreage wise, I think that's why they need that Forest Service to get them into the elk threshold. Correct.
Yeah.
That's probably why. And then they offer an additional elk tag.
I'll check the acreage. But
While we're on discussion, I just want to thank you, Darren, for having that link to that meeting as part of this presentation, because I did take the time and and listened to the meeting. I obviously didn't listen as well as Hunter did because I didn't catch the specifics on this one and I couldn't remember, but I was pretty impressed with how detailed the committee went in on this stuff, and it answered almost every question I had written down, which is why I don't have a lot to say on this, because I think the committee did the job for me. So.
Yeah, I will say that I appreciate at least having the information in the presentation of what the public is getting in trade, whether it's acreage, whether it's permits. I think that's always been a gap that's been kind of hard to understand sometimes. When public land is included, there is, I don't want to call it restitution, but there's things, reciprocity that's given there, but it hasn't always necessarily been easy to find or understand. So.
I'll make a quick comment. It's a little harder when you're online to jump in, but I would just say I'm always hesitant about public land and CWMUs, but if you watch those advisory committee meetings, as Darren pointed out, this short presentation was like 3 hours for these guys to come to the conclusion of the presentation that Darren put together. And I think the CWMUs offer a lot of opportunity to the public, and especially with the trade lands, there's some great opportunity there. I was hesitant on some of the public land included, but after watching the advisory committee meeting, I think it answered my questions and quelled any concerns I have. The only thing I'm probably against in this proposal is having the CW operators not show up for the meeting. I think that I recognize there's some extenuating circumstances that probably wouldn't change in a year period, but I think when things are inconvenient, that people give a little more intention to solving a problem. And while the meeting, one meeting a year is not overly inconvenient, but I think it just helps keep things to the forefront of people's mind that we really want to get this elk population down. And especially where some of these units are, offering cow permits to their private hunters, which was approved through the rule committee and approved through the RACs and all that. And that's great. But, the biggest portion of opportunity for the public with the CW program is antlerless permits, especially cow permits. I mean, there's a few that offer doe permits and things, but those cow elk permits are really a big deal. And so when the private hunters have the opportunity to harvest them when they normally wouldn't, we want to get CWMUs off those programs just as quickly as possible, off those emergency measures. And so for me, I would like to see the CW operators show up every time. I do think, while we're saying that biologists can handle a tough conversation, if it's just mandatory for everybody, then there's no conversation to be had because it's just the way it is. And it's not them being in trouble. Obviously, we recognize there's extenuating circumstances, but it just helps them keep them accountable. I do hear that, that some of the operators would like to not show up every year. And I know that the advisory committee has said that they're okay with that to some extent. But I mean, if I had to find a middle ground, I'd still want them to show up once per core cycle. But I think it's in the best interest of the CWMUs and the public to have people still show up at least sometimes and give that accountability just for how it looks to the public. And also, again, getting these CWMUs off of these emergency measures and back to making sure all those cow permits go to the public. So those are just my comments.
Yeah, I think I actually agree with Hunter on this one of all the things in here. That concerns me a little. I think it's a good accountability measure to bring them back to the advisory committee. That was one of the things put in place when the rule came through last time. I understand, bringing it to the division and being able to speak there, but I just think it can be a little bit subjective when you're trying to make these decisions, trying to understand what the explanation is and to who. And I think there's a little bit more consistency if they just come in front of the advisory committee as the rule had stated. But I do have one question. These season extensions on these three, are they struggling to get their bulls killed, or they just want better days to kill different bulls?
No, sometimes it would make it easier for them. Sometimes those bulls don't come in. It depends on weather and so it's different for each one. But again, they kind of went through this with the advisory committee, and the advisory committee was really supportive. It's like, in fact, they were like, "You want more time?" So we just want to make sure there's quality experience for our public hunters, especially that they, and again, if they get an extension, they have to offer that opportunity to the public as well as to their private hunters. And so, also, I just want to clarify, this recommendation wasn't something that was generated by the CWMUs. This is just something that we thought might administratively help us, based on what we've done before. We don't have CWMUs coming to us saying, hey, we don't want to go to that meeting. That's not how this is generated. Just and then I did get those permits, Ross. So, and maybe we'll pass that point, but it looks like they have 8 private and 2 public bull tags, and 9 and 3 on the deer side. And so, and that was last year. So that would adjust with this recommendation for next year. Well, actually, sorry, these are permits that'll be this fall, but moving forward, if they renew, an additional private tag would go to the public. If we keep that public land, that forest land in the CWMU.
Okay, any other RAC discussion? Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the division's proposal as presented, with the exception of having the CWMUs still show up every year to the advisory committee meeting to report on their cow harvest.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right. Motion by Hunter, seconded by Ross to accept the CWMU with public lands variance request and rule amendments as presented, with the exception of not accepting the change not accepting or removing the requirement that CWMUs come before the advisory committee if they don't get their cow harvest. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote, raise your hands. Okay, motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Darren. All right. Agenda item number 8, Chad Wilson, compensation, or R657-24, compensation for mountain lion, bear, wolf, or eagle damage.
Yeah, so you want me to summarize?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just 2 things to change on the rule. One is to allow the division to designate who can submit a proof of loss form, and then designate if there's a dispute of who sits on that panel.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with questions from RAC members.
On that panel again, that 3 panel, refresh my mind.
So it'd be the producer's choice of somebody, the division's choice of somebody, and then those 2 people would get together and decide, mutually decide on a 3rd person.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Okay, I'm going to summarize public comments on this one.
All right, so we had 2 people comment on this agenda item. One of them somewhat supported and one of them somewhat disagreed with the recommendation. In terms of comments, we did have 1 comment. Let me pull it up real quick. Actually, I don't think we did have a comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we do have 2 public comment cards on this one. Casey Earl, followed by Sierra Nelson.
Casey Earl with the Utah Wool Growers Association. So I've used this. It's worked really well. We're in strong support of it, and supportive of the recommendations of the changes. So thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Sierra Nelson.
Sierra Nelson, the Utah World Rowers Association. I actually recommended that Garrett be the one that had to sit in and review all those. There's only about like 8,000 or 9,000 a year. It shouldn't take long. We're in strong support of this. We're really looking forward for a chance to put some responsibility back on the producers and to alleviate some of the strain on our trappers. So we hope that you can support it as well as recommended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sierra. All right, we'll bring it back for RAC discussion.
I think it's a great idea. If they have a video, they're supposed to video it and send it in. So I think it's a great idea. Take a little pressure off those trappers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a it's a timing issue a lot of times in the summer months to be able to confirm these kills and be on them fresh. And it's really hard for these trappers to make it in time. And it puts more responsibility on the producer to, for one, be educated on what's killing these animals and be able, and so there's not conflict of, well, I had a kill a week ago, why won't you confirm it? And the trapper can't, and then there's that conflict. So this alleviates that conflict with the trapper.
Okay. All right, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the compensation for mountain lion, bear, wolf, or eagle damage as presented.
Second the motion.
Okay, motion by Wyatt, seconded by Garrett to accept as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote, raise your hands. Thank you. Motion passes unanimous. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break based on the number of public comment cards in this next agenda item. We might need a little bit of time, so. Okay. All right, we're back. Okay, we are moving on to agenda item number 9. R657-11, taking fur bearers and trapping with Chad Wilson. Anything? Where do you want to start with this one, Chad? Do you want to?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just give a brief background of how we got to where we're at.
That would be great. Thank you.
So this really started prior to House Bill 469. That House bill is the one that made it so you could hunt or trap cougars 365 days a year with a hunting or combination license. So prior to that, the division attempted multiple times to increase cougar permits to help address predation rates. And we did so without a ton of success. With those attempts and the lack of success over time, there was frustration that was happening inside the division with some other organizations and ultimately the legislature. And they passed 469 in an attempt to help be able to control the cougar problem and help the deer. When they passed that, then there was we had a lot of constituents that came to the board and to us and said, can we restrict some of those methods, specifically saying the lethal trapping, that they wanted to restrict it so we couldn't have lethal trapping of cougars at that time. The wildlife board decided to not go with those measures and to allow lethal trapping. At that time, the division, we said, we will look at this and particularly look at the methods over 3 years. And if we think it warrants a change, then we'll come back and recommend changes. And so that's where we're at today. As the division, we've sat down, we've had those conversations, we've looked at the data like we promised that we would. That data shows that over the last 3 years, on average, 7 cougars get snared or lethally trapped. With that and with all the concern, there is a risk with snares out there, right? Dogs and hounds and whatnot. With that risk and the low amount of mortality we get from lethal sets, we've decided that this would be a great time to recommend to not allow lethal sets on public land. So this was a decision that we discussed internally. We're comfortable with this decision. We did talk to many organizations, many people. We let them know that this is what we're going to recommend. Not everybody agreed with that recommendation. I think you'll see that tonight, but I feel like this is the form for it, right? This is a recommendation that we're making off of what we feel is the data that's presented to us, and others are welcome to voice support or opposition to that.
Okay, thank you. We'll start off with some questions just for clarification. Is it fair to say that rather than consulting these groups for feedback into this, they were simply notified that this is the path forward we were going? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you notify like this is what we're going to do, of course, there's going to be some they'll express concerns and you listen to those concerns. So I'd say it wasn't just we're going to do this. There was some back and forth at the end of it. It was like, we understood that not everybody was comfortable with it, and we still felt like it was what we needed to do and the right recommendation.
Okay. Can you, how do you define a lion snare versus other species? We're going to outlaw lethal snares for lions. How do you define that?
Yeah, so we're leaving that pretty vague on purpose. I think more than trying to define that, we would look at what was happening on the landscape. So if you have somebody that's out setting lethal traps and they get 4 lions, it's probably a lion set. If they're out, if they get one on occasion, then it's probably not. So rather than get into the weeds on that, that's probably more how we would handle it, is if there's somebody that's having a problem that they need to either do something different or they're targeting lions.
So if we're looking at potentially punishing or prosecuting someone for breaking a law from a legal aspect, granted, I'm not an attorney. We can one up the Central RAC. We have a retired judge here. So, but it seems like leaving it vague on purpose is probably not a best practice if we're going to talk about a law in place. Is that a fair statement?
I think we're comfortable with the way that it's written. It's illegal to target cougars with these traps. Rather than getting into the specifics of it, I think that people with experience will be able to tell, like they know like location and some other indicators that you can also tell whether that's a set for a cougar or not. We also don't want it to be like if somebody is not purposely trapping them, that they potentially get in trouble for targeting a cougar when they're not.
Okay. Any other questions from RAC members?
Yes, along with that, there's the exemption for agricultural depredation. So those sets could be on public land still for depredation.
Yeah.
And then is there any notification process, or how would anybody out there differentiate between the depredation set and just another set out there?
As far as like reporting it, if they found it, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like as far as enforcement goes, is as part of that depredation rule, is there any kind of notification to the division that there is depredation and there's a depredation trap set being put out?
Yeah, I mean, we have conversations with the depredation, the Department of Ag. That's who is generally out there doing it. And so, yeah, we have those conversations. We know where there's problems so that
Like
they're
if
targeting.
a producer is putting out a cougar trap set, is there any official communication?
So if a producer himself, they probably don't tell us. Yeah.
So if part of the driving force here is concern about safety for pets or hounds on the landscape, but a government trapper can still use a snare, and there's not a mechanism in place for that government trapper to alert houndsmen or the public that there's snares out there, we haven't really resolved the problem.
I think a government trapper, state trapper knows a little better where to set a snare. I think you can enlighten me, Chad, but where are these problems occurring with pets? Is it on the Wasatch Front or?
Yeah, to be honest, since I've been in here, I haven't had a lot of reports.
We did have a report in Fruit Heights. I live in Farmington, and pictures were taken of that and disseminated, and I had understood it had gone to the division. But basically, this trap was set not far off of a public trail that's used a lot. And I know when we discussed this before, I raised the concern, can we at least not know where those traps are, particularly on the Wasatch Front? And I understood you can't do that because then people might steal the traps. I get that. I understand that. But yeah, I mean, there is a problem.
To be fair on that too,
yeah, or just a leg hold trap.
I honestly can't tell you that.
That was a leg hold trap on that one. So yeah.
So then, if you can't think of an example that this has happened, there's still not really a problem that we're trying to resolve.
Other than it does solve the one problem, part of it. You're right, it's not a full solution, but it's a partial solution. It's at least not taking the life of, say, a pet, for instance, instantly, and you've got the chance of necessitating or recovering that pet.
Chad, have you seen an influx in new trappers since this line rule took effect?
Influx in the number of trappers?
In the numbers of like new trappers.
I haven't looked at that to see. I couldn't answer that.
Was the Utah Trappers Association one of the groups you consulted in preparing this?
So I talked to the Trappers Association president 3 weeks ago, told him that this was, we had a conversation about it, told him that this was something that we're going to recommend.
But not in the planning to recommend it process. It was kind of the after the fact, this is what we're going to do.
It was the same conversation that we had with pretty much all the groups is something that we thought as a division after looking at the data. Like I said, we looked at that data. There's not very many cougars killed. There is a risk, whether there's a lot of dogs or hounds getting caught, there is a risk. I think if it was your dog or hound, if you're the unlucky one, then it feels different. So with that risk, is something that we felt like we needed to do. And so we just had that conversation saying, look, this is why we're making this recommendation. We listened to what they had to say, their feedback. Like I said, some told us they didn't like it. I think you'll hear that more tonight. And yeah, so we listened to it, but it didn't change how we felt our recommendation should be.
Do you know how many cougars were taken on public ground with lethal sets out of the 7 average?
I don't know.
It's hard.
I don't know.
And there's
Yeah.
not a reporting on that, of course, but
Yeah.
just curious on how,
I don't know how that was broken down though.
Okay. And number of incidents with hounds or pets being caught in lethal sets in the past 3 years, we don't have
I don't have a
number.
solid number. I know it was more the first year. Probably more people tried
Right.
and it's probably just not very successful
effective.
method. Yeah, it's not very effective way to do it. So I think there's probably less out there and yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head how many lions are taken? We say spot and stock or incidental now. How many are taken annually?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but let me see if I can find that real quick. I have the total trapped and I don't have spot and stock on this one. Let me look one other place. I know I have that somewhere, but I'm not finding it right off.
It's not high. It's not in the hundreds by any means, is it?
The spot
roughly?
and stock. No, I mean, hounds is by far
far
the
the most.
one. Yeah, that's where we get the majority harvest.
Can I ask, so you say the data, right? What specific, sorry, it might be dumb, but I'm just like, what specific data are we going to say only so many on the average that we're taking versus we don't know how many pets or hounds or whatnot? Like, so where from the division you guys coming to that decision to make this proposal? I guess kind of what specific data is that?
Yeah. So I mean, when we're looking at it, it's what percentage of lions are being taken by lethal traps, and it's less than 2%. It's like 1%. So when you take that set of saying, well, this really isn't moving the needle one way or another, right? And then that there's so many people concerned about the risk out there, it really feels like it eases their concern about the risk, and it's not affecting our cougar harvest, right?
Why carve out private land? If snares are a problem on public, they're a problem on private. Why are we exempting private land?
So you just go back to that same rationale with the fear that people have with risk, with public land, private land. Private landowners can do a lot of different things, and so just the assumption that there's more risk.
Wasn't there concern from the houndsmen, I think in previous meetings, and people had reported hounds getting caught in snares?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just the one Fruit Heights dog. There's multiple instances of this, correct?
Yeah, and the fruit. Yeah. So, and we probably need to differentiate between ones that are getting caught in snares as opposed to those that are caught in other types of traps, because we're just looking at snares.
I was asking about hounds getting caught in snares.
Yeah. So the one in Fruit Heights was a foothold trap. So that one wasn't a snare. The beginning when this came, I think that there was 5 to 10 hounds that were snared. I don't know of any one that lost a hound from snares since I've been in for a year. So it's just, and maybe maybe they don't all get reported to me. Maybe people don't know me yet, but I just haven't had the reports of any getting killed in the snare.
One thing that was brought up last night in the central meeting, and I don't know that it was, either I missed it or it was just didn't get fully addressed, but are non-lethal snares even legal to be used at all right now?
Yeah, so looking at this, so maybe that's a good point of clarification for anybody that watched. They were talking about relaxing locks. And so after doing a little more research after the meeting, relaxing locks probably are lethal snares. The point of those is if you catch it, that like potentially a pet that's used to being on a leash will stop, and then it will stop choking, right? But most of the times wild animals aren't going to stop. They're not going to. So it turns into what we'd consider a lethal snare.
I snare a lot of beavers, live capture with relaxing locks. And once, about 10 years ago, one died. All the rest are alive when I get there, and I'm able to put in a transport cage to surrender to the division. So my personal experience with a different species, admittedly, is that relaxing locks are in fact very effective at not being lethal.
They can be, but I would say like it all depends on the animal, right? Like you even had a beaver that did it. Like some dogs are even very energetic, and if it doesn't stop, it's going to be lethal. So it probably takes some of the risk, but I would think most lions are probably not going to hold still, is what my guess would be. Now pets, there's probably a higher likelihood that they would, or hounds.
So then that would help mitigate the concern of pets and hounds.
Yeah. I don't think it would eliminate that risk and concern, but it would help. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from the RAC? Okay, any questions from the public? All right, one question, yeah, come on up.
Chad Price, stand here. We're going to have a question. So
let's share my.
Thank you. My name is Chris Snell from the Utah Trappers Association. Just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned that, you know, the relaxing snares does mitigate some of that concern with the hounds, but that it still would be lethal to the lions. This rule, is it specific to protecting the hounds or the lions?
I don't know that I think we just try to set forth trapping regulations that I don't know that we try to consider both, I think.
Over the last couple of years, since HB 40s or 469, how many incidental lions were reported killed by hounds on the ground?
I haven't had any. So that's over the last year. I haven't had any, but yeah.
Is there an official like process to notify the division of hounds that have been snared and killed to you, or is it? And I know you mentioned that was already asked, but how many have been killed over the last couple of years since HB 469?
So yeah, with 469, it was still mandatory for people to turn their cats in.
No, for the hounds, how many hounds died in snares?
Yeah, I don't have.
And is there like official process they go through to notify the division, or is it just kind of, I mean, is there documented cases, stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't have any documented cases in the last year that I've worked. The assumption would be that they work with the division, that they would call who they know, and eventually that would work its way up to me or Darren. Like I said, that first year, I know that there was, I don't know the exact number, but it feels like it was 5 to 10 that were that were killed by snares.
I think that's most of my questions for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Okay, you want to summarize public comments on this?
Yep, so we had 2 public comments on this action item, and both of those people strongly agreed with the recommendation. And to summarize their concerns, they had concerns with just lethal trapping in general, pets getting caught in traps, and then also a comment about just not supporting trapping at all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, got a number of public comment cards on this agenda item. So let's start off. Sierra Nelson, followed by Aaron Ferguson.
Just kidding. I didn't have anything cheeky for that one. You know, I've gone back and forth on a lot of this, and I had a lot of thoughts. But when it comes right down to it, my name's Sierra Nelson. I represent the Utah Wool Growers Association. We've got producers out there that suffer losses all the time. And I have to say that we are strongly opposed to this, and we hope that you vote it down. There's no room to go back here. There's room to make possibly some compromising change, maybe along the front, maybe some things that can make it safer for dogs. I'm a dog lover, I get it. But that doesn't mean that you take a step back, especially if it's the first step. So we strongly disagree with it. We hope that you'll vote it down. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sierra. Aaron Ferguson, followed by Casey Earl. You're good.
My name's Erin Ferguson. I'm represent a lot of concerned neighbors in Summit County. Come from a hunting family, so I do appreciate the multiple dimensions of this issue. However, I'm concerned about the biological component, the science-based decisions that need to be at play here. Generally speaking, I do support the division's recommendation to restrict lethal traps on public lands. But due to public safety concerns, I also ask that the division prohibit the use of all traps and snares for mountain lions on all public lands, but especially the Watershed Restoration Initiative Study Area 7707. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Casey Earl, followed by Taylor Turner.
Casey Earl again. Yeah, so I'm a sheep producer in northern Utah. We run in the Cache National Forest, and we suffer from monumental lion losses every year. And we're finally starting to see a little bit of that slowing down, maybe. So for my livelihood, I strongly urge you to not support this. We need every tool we can get to try to help sustain our livelihood. We've got coyotes and we've got lions and bears now, and another thing we're struggling with now is eagles. So it's just one thing after another. We just need you to try to support us if you can and vote this down. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey. Taylor Turner, followed by I think it's Tade Wilson. I hope I got that right.
My name is Taylor Turner, speaking tonight on behalf of Utah Mountain Lion Conservation. We support the proposed rule change regarding R657-11 and urge the council to vote in favor of the recommendation this evening. We'd like to thank the division for following through on their commitment and revising management regulations for cougars in Utah after the stated 3-year review period. As stated, risks to other wildlife, hounds, pets, and violations of fair chase principles push snares and other lethal traps into a category of take we cannot have on our landscapes for cougars. Therefore, the removal of lethal traps, especially considering their low share of total cougar harvest numbers, is a logical and necessary step to protect our state's wildlife. We would also like to make it abundantly clear that we do not support bans on trapping for all species. We recognize the legacy and heritage of trapping in the state, as well as its place as a management tool. We welcome discussion and questions from members of the trapping community and hope to work with them in developing solutions for our wildlife in the near future. All that being said, we strongly support the removal of trapping for mountain lions, which was the precedent before House Bill 469 was passed. Mountain lion hunting, as any hound hunters in tonight's audience will well know, is unique in the fact that you have a significant ability to select which cats you ultimately harvest. Trapping removes that selective ability, and for that reason, we do not support the trapping of lions in any capacity in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Tade Wilson, followed by Troy Justinson.
Hi there, my name is Tade Wilson, representing myself tonight. I'll echo the comments just barely made. I recommend that the council put a motion forward and vote in favor of the recommendation. And I also would like to thank the division for following through on the promise they made post 469. But I do think that brings up a broader point about how we manage predators in the state. And tonight's issue is a shining example of that. And I highly recommend that the council and the division employees present tonight look at this agenda item as an opportunity and as a lesson to try to take back some control that has been stripped away by what I would consider overreach by the legislature. And I think it's very dangerous anytime that we make wildlife policy outside of the process that we're all engaging in tonight. And this is an excellent opportunity to, as small as it may seem, to get back to that process the way it was originally intended to be. I've heard often at these RAC meetings that hands are tied and there's only so much that can be done. And in this situation, I understand that specifically, but it's a golden opportunity to untie some of that a little bit. And then speaking more broadly on lions, I think that the approach we have taken over the last 3 years, which now includes state-sponsored, localized extermination efforts. I think that's a course that will be difficult to correct for future generations, and that is where our focus should be. Too often we are reactionary when things don't go our way. And I'd rather see that the RAC return to what I was used to it being, which is a forward focus, maintaining our landscapes for all generations to come. And not just the landscapes that we think they should be, but the landscapes that they always have been with each component present. Thank you.
Thank you, Tade. Troy Justinson, followed by Brett Guyman.
Troy Justinson, representing Sports Fish and Wildlife. Got to get my composure here and get my emotions in check. It's not on this subject, but I just received my unsuccessful email on the hunt, so sorry. I was there. I was this close, but now y'all getting your phones and I see this. Jeez. No, I appreciate the opportunity to address them tonight. And I hope a lot of you guys watched the Central RAC last night, because this is a lot bigger than snares. I mean, snares being used, but the end goal of this, like other people, which they have the right to express their opinions, their wishes, but it is to end all trapping, hunting, pursuit of mountain lions, whatever. Not in favor of this. Sports and Fish and Wildlife is not. We believe it is a very valuable tool. You know, you heard mention that only 7 were caught. That's not the case. Not the case at all. And I'm not going to go into it, but snares are a very effective tool in what we do. The producers know this. And they continue. And they should be allowed to continue to use them. And this really came about under concern of catching hounds within these snares. And I understand that. I don't want to see a dog hurt. I don't want to see that. You tell me how many dogs and how many houndsmen are actually down on the Escalante Desert or the Dirty Devil. There's places that this can be used. Does it fit here on the Wasatch Front on the shoreline? No, it doesn't. But just to put a total ban on it and to tie our hands in places that are extremely difficult to get harvest any other way is not the right move. You know, I went to the RAC last night and went to my brother's house, and they told me an interesting story when I got there. I got a nephew that was invited to a dance, and he was trying to come up with a way to say yes. And his idea was, he had this idea, he's going to go buy 2 goldfish and say, I officially say yes. So he goes to the pet store, goes to buy these goldfish, and they say, you got to be 18 to buy goldfish. And I'm being a serious story. So he calls his mother, said, Mom, you got to come down here. You got to be 18 to buy goldfish. Krista drives down there, goes in there, says, yeah, you want 2 goldfish. The guy says, well, do you have a tank? She goes, no, I have a bowl. I can't sell them to you unless you have a tank with a filter and an air pump. She goes, are you kidding me? She goes, no, I can't. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I used to go to King's or whatever and buy whatever fish we want. But this is the world we live in is a different time and place. And you've seen that last night, and many of those people were there. I respect their ability to have their own personal choice. But there's nothing wrong with allowing us to use these snares properly. They are a valuable tool. They're a necessity. In fact, probably one of the greatest conservationists in the world, Teddy Roosevelt, stated, in order to have abundant game herds, we have to manage predators. It's just the way it is. And so I would encourage this RAC to not support this recommendation, but ask the division to get with the stakeholders, a lot of them in this room, and come back with some common ground. Whether it be a COR to educate us on those that are using these snares, where they can't set them, and the ethics and just some common sense behind it. Draw a unit that, hey, you can use lethal snares in these units, you can't in these units, but please don't ban it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Troy. Brett Guyman, followed by Ken Strong.
Brett Guyman with the Utah Hills Association. I'm going to start off by answering a few of the questions that were asked of the division earlier that perhaps the division didn't have an answer for. Number one, the concern with, if wildlife services is using snares, are we really solving the problem by eliminating everybody else from using snares? Wildlife services has always used snares. And prior to, 3 years ago, I didn't hear of a single issue of a dog getting caught in a snare and killed. That's because, in my opinion, wildlife services they're professionals. They know how to target the species that they're after, whereas I think a lot of trappers, particularly new trappers, don't know how to make those sets in such a way that eliminates hounds, eliminates pets, eliminates other non-target species from getting caught in those snares. So we don't have a problem with wildlife services doing their job. They've got a job to do. They've got to do it. Secondarily, the division indicated that they have no confirmed cases of hounds getting in snares and snares doing their job, being lethal. We have 11 confirmed cases. We'll do a better job at communicating those up to the division if that's what they would like us to do. We have a lot more that are hearsay. That's 11 confirmed that we know. The thing you got to realize about snares is they are lethal. I'm not talking snares. I'm saying lethal sets. That's the division's language, and I agree with that language. That was to answer a few questions. Now, in my regularly scheduled, what I was going to say is trapping has to be something that we protect. It's a tool that the division uses to manage species. The same way hounds is a tool that the division uses to manage species. We need to not only that, as a tool, it's got a long history of tradition. You know, trapping was going on before this state was even formed. We need to keep that tradition alive, and we need to keep it well. I know the trappers are in opposition of this proposal. We're in support of this proposal. And the reason, two main reasons. Number one, we would like to see our animals protected. Like I said, snares are not discretionary. You get a cow dog, a sheep dog caught in a snare, it's dead. You get a mule deer fawn caught in a snare, it's dead. You get a hound caught in a snare, it's dead. An elk calf, it's dead. They're non-discretionary. It takes out the ability for a sportsman to come up and be selective on whether they decide to let that animal go or not. That said, we understand, you know, in talking to Kelly, the Trappers Association president, they see this, and I think it's a legitimate concern, as a slippery slope. Once you remove this, what's next? You know, eventually we're going to lose trapping. We need to make sure that never happens. We've got to conserve. You know, we've got to maintain that lifestyle and that tool. I think there is a place for this proposal to go through. Number one, to protect our animals as well as other animals. I don't know if any of you are chucker hunters. You know, we're not unique to the you know, dogs on the landscape argument. There's other sportsmen out there who use dogs on the landscape all the time. We are impacted by this, and it is a huge impact to our livelihood. Many of us, when one of our hounds is killed. These are just at the Houndsman Association banquet. A pup, an 8-month-old pup, went for about $8,000 and $9,000. That's how much these hounds are worth. Not only that, these are our pals. We spend a lot of time with these dogs, and we have a lot invested in them, and we're just trying to protect them. That's the number one reason. Number two, I'm gonna very quickly go down memory lane. Years ago in Utah, we were able to pursue game with an unlimited number of hounds. And there was a small portion of our community who abused that rule. We went down, you know, and then when we're from out of state, they would come in with 30, 40, 50 dogs and just overrun a place with dogs. And the division came in and made the recommendation that they limit the number of dogs in pursuit. And at the time, we were scared to death that was the first step in eliminating hounds in Utah. Since then, I look back on that, and I haven't given that a second thought. That was not in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion, a way to eliminate hound hunting in Utah. And I see this proposal as very, very similar. I think you catch the wrong species in the wrong trap with the wrong person. That is bad, 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 bad press. Many of you, you know, aren't aware of the 11 cases that I talk about. That's because we have tried our best to keep those to ourselves. That is not good for any kind of sportsman to have those photos, those videos, or any of those stories out there. So I think we've you know, accomplished that fairly well.
Give you just a little bit longer to wrap up your thoughts. You're over your time.
I'm wrapped up. So
okay.
Thank you for your time, and I appreciate all of your thoughtful consideration of this. But we do support that for those two reasons.
Thank you, Brett. Ken Strong, followed by Angie Wanacott.
Ken Strong, representing myself. I'm one of those that have lost a dog in a snare. I learned from it. I learned it from the houndsman. You buy the collar so you can track your dog. So when you can't find it, you know where to go to look. I lost mine down at Utah Lake hunting pheasants. Snares are legal for everything else. Right now, they're legal for lions, and they ought to stay that way. We need to control get the lions under control. I can't remember how many it is for each deer killed by a car on the highway, how many deer are killed by a lion, by a car? And that's a lot. We're trying to get our deer herd back. And I like I said, I hunt in the mountains all the time for grouse, but I have the collars on my dog so I can locate them and I had one get in a snare on the mountain, but I knew where to go to look for it, and it didn't kill it. The dog didn't try to get away. I would urge you to not support this, and let's keep getting the lions under control and use snares. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Angie Wanacott, followed by Tanner Carlson.
Hi, my name is Angie Wanacott, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I do not support a statewide ban on lethal sets for lions. I do ask the RAC not to pass the DWR's recommendation, but rather direct the division to get with the respective stakeholders and find some middle ground that allows trappers to still use this valuable harvest tool to harvest mountain lions. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Tanner Carlson, followed by Chris Carling.
Tanner Carlson, thank you guys for your time. I heard that Brad's taking us all out for burgers after, so everybody here is welcome to come. Brad buying. No, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I strongly oppose the division on this, which is a bummer because usually they're trying to do what's best, and I just feel like they are missing the mark here. We have a good thing going. Things are progressing. Wildlife's bouncing back in areas, and we're trying to take 5 steps back for some reason. I've heard a couple comments before me about dogs and snares and a dog in fruit heights and a foothold. Anytime you take a dog or an animal off a leash, you're running a risk for anything. So that's on the owner, not on somebody putting a snare trying to control predators. So it's also a thing too with dogs getting killed by cougars or bears as they're out chasing. The dogs can tree a bear or a cat. Sometimes they get real aggressive and can kill each other. So it's pretty disappointing to see groups getting together with anti-hunters and wanting to push this agenda. I've seen it on the cache firsthand. There's a few guys that are extremely good at harvesting predators, and the wildlife is just booming on the cache. I've been able to hear from the Gorings. They are fairly big producer in northern Utah, and they've had wonderful success with their lamb crop, and it's an exciting thing. So I just ask you guys to not approve the division's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanner. Chris Carling, followed by Chris Snell.
I'm Chris Carling, just representing myself as a Davis County resident. I oppose the division's proposal to ban lethal snares as a tool for mountain lion management. Snaring is a proven and effective predator management tool. I do support exploring reasonable measures that reduce risk to pets, hounds, and non-target animals, but eliminating it entirely would remove a critical option from wildlife managers and also from those who work to protect livestock and livelihoods. Responsible use and thoughtful regulation, I think, is the appropriate path forward, not a wholesale ban. An outright banning on lethal snaring goes a bit too far, and I urge the council to preserve lethal snaring as a legitimate and viable wildlife management tool that should be regulated and not eliminated entirely. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Chris Snell, that's our last comment card for this agenda item.
Thank you. My name is Chris Snell. I represent the Utah Trappers Association. I'm their secretary and their treasurer. I just want to let you guys know about the Utah Trappers Association. We represent hundreds of trappers, and these trappers know their stuff. They're not brand new. They know their art and their tools. They take great care because they care about the animals, not just the ones that they're pursuing, but the other ones. They try as hard as they can to avoid incidental catches. And it's a little hurtful when we see a rule come out that says we restrict the use of lethal trap sets on public land for cougar sport harvest, but we allow everybody else to do it. Trappers know their stuff. If anybody should be allowed to do it, it's trappers. Usually we hold different trainings, we hold different seminars, different things to help our trappers become even better at the art. So with that being said, I just want to read our official statement on opposing this rule as it is. The Utah Trappers Association is an organization that just celebrated 50 years. Our mission has always been and continues to be to preserve our trapping heritage by promoting humane and ethical practices, which has provided predator management at no cost to sportsmen and government agencies. We were surprised, like many others, when the Utah State Legislature passed House Bill 469, which significantly changed management framework for cougars by removing many previous protections. We believe strong science-based wildlife management remains essential for healthy cougar populations and balanced ecosystems. For many years, some of our members have wanted to be able to harvest a cougar on their own with traps. But contrary to popular belief, the Utah Trappers Association had not campaigned for this legislation in any way. It was becoming obvious to most everyone that our deer herds were struggling, and if we were ever going to rebuild them in most areas of Utah, the cougar populations needed to be managed and reduced. This has been proven by extensive radio collaring that has been implemented on various big game animals by the division. The division has been trying to accomplish this by increasing the cougar harvest objective quotas in these areas each year, but the quotas were not being reached. Modern tools used in trapping today is probably the most humane, ethical, and by far most effective method of predator control. Trapping in any form had previously not been allowed to reach these quotas. Up until 2023, it was believed by many that only one group of people should be harvesting the cougars. Trappers were never part of that equation and were never asked if they could be part of the solution. We don't think cougars should be annihilated, but like all wildlife, they need to be managed. And had we been asked, we could have offered other options. No bag limits, quotas, or regulations across the state doesn't seem like the right answer. When targeting cougars, proper size footholds and cable restraints, snares with relaxing locks, which are designed to restrain rather than kill, would be one option, which hasn't been considered. If a dog that is leash broken or is accustomed to being tied up strays and gets caught in a cable restraint, it will be waiting for its handler unharmed. Most dogs won't fight even a non-relaxing lock if they have been tied out before. We would encourage implementing a required cougar trapping course. This would be similar to the current coyote bounty course, but would focus on ethical methods of harvesting cougars. As you can see, trapping cougars is being very effective in the new lion study units, where deer herds have been struggling the most. When we saw this recommended rule change, we reached out to our members with an email asking for feedback without trying to sway them in any direction. The overwhelming response we received was an opposition to this rule that's presented as is. Not primarily because every member plans to snare a cougar, but those 1.2% of sportsmen and women that may have not had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. they consider that a once in a lifetime opportunity to harvest a lion. Many trappers and sportsmen alike see this as the beginning of a slippery slope of losing our privileges one at a time, like what has been happening in surrounding states.
I'll give you about 30 seconds to
Thank
wrap
you.
up, please.
We believe that a more specific approach to managing cougars would be better than throwing a blanket over the whole state without target numbers in any areas will result in underharvest in some areas and over in others. We oppose this amendment and suggest tabling this recommendation, giving time to evaluate the options and invite the Trappers Association to be included in this discussion. We found out about it April 27th, 2 weeks ago. We as trappers believe in science-based management that will support healthy, sustainable populations of deer, cougars, and other wildlife species. Last night, I heard multiple times at the Central RAC meeting that this rule to restrict the use of lethal trap sets on public land sport harvest is a good first step.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you. What was meant by that? A good first step. We hope that the final decision doesn't lead us down the same slippery slope that will lead to all of us losing our opportunities to pursue our way of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's all the public comment cards we have on the agenda item. So we'll bring it back for RAC discussion.
I'll get the ball rolling. So there's been a few things said, you know, I feel like the problem that we're trying to solve is it's not necessarily we're annihilating the cougars with lethal sets. It's very low percentage. So the solution that we're trying to, there's the risks side of it. We're trying to come up with a solution to the risk of people's pets and dogs being caught in these lethal sets. Our family, we're producers up in northern Utah, run sheep and cattle, and we set a lot of snares. It's a very useful tool that we use. I actually use my dogs to set my snares in a trail, so I know where to put the loop. You know, I catch my dogs all the time. And as soon as they feel that pressure, they lay down and wait for me to come off. We have sheep herders that have called numerous times and say, hey, I'm missing a border collie dog. Can't find him. And we'll go back. It might be 12 hours later and he's laying in a snare, completely fine. Let him out. He just act like he'd been tied up. If a dog's used to being tied up, then it's a very low amount of incidents. Now I understand hounds on the chase hitting something that might increase a little bit, but for the pet and recreation, dogs used to being tied up and even hounds used to being tied up, it's not a big risk. I think that a blanket statement to try and fix this with all lethal sets is not the correct way to go. I think there's other tools. Each one of these snares should have an individual trapper ID number on them. If there's an incident, the houndsman or whoever may give that to or report that to the DWR. They can investigate, and there's some education that can be done on that. I think another solution could be, you know, like you said, an education course. I think unit specific areas with high traffic of recreation or hounds or a lot of incidents in one area, maybe there's a way that we can come up with a solution there. I guess what it comes down to is the motivation behind all this. I think we're using pets and hounds as the stick, but the motivation behind it is to remove this tool from taking cougars in the state. And I don't agree with that. So I'm against it.
I just ask a follow-up on yours. For your sets, that are those relaxing snares or is that?
I mean, I guess I wasn't aware of the relaxing or the non-relaxing. I mean, it's a lock that will tighten the more pressure's on it. And
it's kind of the standard.
Standard. I mean, as soon as they feel the pressure, they stop. If they move more, it tightens, but it doesn't tighten all the way right off the bat. I don't know what technically a relaxing lock is. It's just a regular cam lock that we use.
Based on the information that has been presented to us by the division, this to me looks like a solution looking for a problem. We don't really have a big issue with, we're not killing too many cougars. So it's not that we're over harvesting because we're using snares. We're under harvesting, if anything. There's not a high incidence of pets or hounds getting caught that's brought this to bear. It seems to me that we're trying to silence the squeaky wheel. That's what I see, is that there's a silent, or not silent, but a very vocal minority that's speaking to the division and saying we need to get rid of these snares, and maybe they're given reasons, but and maybe the division, they have to play some politics in this. And so I can see the division saying, okay, let's see if we can find a way to appease this part of the public. The reality is once they get their way, they'll just come back with something else. And so it's really not going to solve the problem. And when I hear from the houndsmen talking about snares, and they're saying, well, we've never had a problem until we had uneducated trappers. Well, so an educated trapper is not a problem. So what I hear in all of this is there are some solutions that can work for everybody involved, where we can still allow snares. Maybe there's some caveats, but I don't think this has been properly explored. I think there needs to be a committee with all the stakeholders involved, and let's come up with some solutions. I can see a restriction along the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, because we know the people are supposed to have the dogs on leashes, but they don't. And it's not a good place to trap bobcats anyway. And it's not just cougars. You know, it could be bobcat trappers that are a problem. It could be coyote trappers that are a problem. But it's more than most likely uneducated trappers that are the problem. So if we require a mandatory course like we do for many other things that educates them on proper places to set your traps, there's a lot of solutions here to actually fix what may be problems, but what we really don't have is a problem. And so there's no need to have a solution when we don't really have a problem. So I don't think this has been thought through enough. I think it needs to go through a committee and come back to us with some well thought out solutions.
I 100% agree with the committee. Table this, and hopefully the wildlife board will table it too, and have a committee put together. And one thing I've been thinking of is, in these populated areas, make a law that states you can't have a trap within a quarter mile, half mile, whatever the committee decides. Division does an awesome job with committees. Listening to everybody talk brings up a story. We were out lion hunting this winter, and my friend's dog got caught in a snare. We go up and we release it, and the dog's fine. My buddy turns to me and goes, "Steve, I guess this trapper has just as much right to be on public property as we do." And I said, "You're 100% right, Kevin." If you turn hounds loose, there's 100 things that could go wrong. Ledges, ground fights. It's a risk you take every time you turn your hound out, period. Traps have been around 200 plus years in this state. This hasn't been a problem. I acknowledge it. Bonneville Shoreline's a problem. Let's educate people or do something of that nature instead of putting a ban on it.
Kind of to your comment that trapping and snaring and different things have been around for 200 years, since before this was a state. One of the things that a member of the public reached out to me with was speculating of, is this even constitutional, where our state constitution protects traditional hunting and trapping methods. Chad, is that something that the division has looked at, the constitutionality of banning a traditional method of harvest?
Yeah, so trapping would still be allowed. It's like most of the species that we have, like if you deer, sometimes you hunt deer, there'll be season dates. There's different weapons that you can use. So snaring or lethal is one method. So yeah, we think.
But with snaring being a traditional method of harvest, specifically, if you're trying to ban that specific traditional method of harvest, the member of the public that reached out to me was like, is that even going to fly through the state constitution?
Yeah, we believe it will. Like because you can still snare other things. This would just be snaring of one species on public land. So you could actually even still snare cougars, just not on public land if it passed.
I ask a couple of questions that really the dialogue here is raised in my mind. Number one is there any requirement for reporting when a lion's taken with a lethal trap?
Yeah, every lion that's taken needs to come and get checked by the division, and it gets a permanent seal on it. They tell us how they took that lion.
Which troubles me when I hear from the sportsman's organization, which I have a lot of respect for and understand. I'm certainly not an anti-hunter. I'm an avid hunter. And I certainly have nothing against trapping per se, but we're hearing a statement that there are lots more lions caught by lethal traps on public land. That's what's being reported by the division. I mean, that doesn't seem to jive with what you just answered to me.
Yeah, and so I'm specifically talking about sport harvest. I don't know if they're including some of the harvest that's been happening through our predator.
Maybe that's the
like
demarcation. I don't know. Secondly, for a non-trapper, but again, not certainly an anti-trapper, explain to me, you or somebody, what is actually lost, because we're asked, no, I won't get into that right yet. What is actually lost by not having a lethal trap allowed? Because you're still allowing the snares, correct? On public land that are not lethal.
Yeah,
but as a non-lion hunter, I need to know that.
They're allowing snares for everything, bobcats, everything but lions. You know, snares, when you set a snare for a lion, in my opinion, you're going to set it right where you're going to set a bobcat trap. In the ledges, underneath the ledge, in a pinch point in the saddle. You know, and there's somebody made this point, you know, I think it was Brad. How do you enforce this? You can't enforce this.
Well, and that's a different issue, whether you can enforce it or not. If you get down to some kind of a criminal penalty, I don't think needs to be a concern unduly here, frankly. I think that's for the judicial system to deal with. But my question was more, if you don't have the opportunity to set a lethal trap for lions or whatever on public land, have you lost the chance to snare them otherwise?
I'll tell you what Sierra meant by first step. Last night's rack, anti-hunter stood up and commented, this is the first step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to take that.
And so I think it sounds to me like there's still those other options. And I understand the slippery slope argument. I understand the anti-hunter concern argument, just like I would understand somebody with their Second Amendment concerns. And I may disagree with somebody over to the far side, but I at least get the argument. Frankly, I think this discussion goes far abroad of what's being presented to us. What's being presented to us are facts that tend to show that this has a minuscule effect on the lion population, which would have a minimal effect on the sheep or whatever else is being protected by harvesting, by trapping the lions. All we're talking about here, as I see it, is that just what the division has presented. There's very few lions being taken with legal traps on public land, number one. And number two, there is something that has to be balanced against, and that's the public's safety. And it includes their dogs. And people can say all they want, keep the dog on a leash, but you're allowed to have dogs on public lands off leashes. And to simply say, if you tie up your dog all the time, I don't tie up my dog, but he never leaves my yard because he's been trained not to. And I don't even have to have one of those wire fences, although my daughter does, and I get those work. But he just never would leave. And he's a terrific hunting dog. And like was said, far more valuable to me than just what somebody would pay me for what I spent the time to train. I think we're dealing with a very narrow issue here that's gotten extraordinarily broad because of the emotions. That's why personally I support the division.
But
thank you.
Okay.
I just have a quick comment, which I actually agree with what's been said about changing or having some opportunity to have a committee or talk about possibly banning some certain areas. But I oppose this primarily because I have no appetite to restrict the public on public land while allowing other groups to still do something. And I'm all for producers trapping mountain lions. And so my thing is ban everybody or don't ban anybody. And I'm really not interested in having producers stopping doing it either. And so for that reason, I'm probably going to vote against this proposal. Just want to throw it out there. So.
Yeah, kind of talking from the public land perspective and the land management perspective. We do have multiple use lands. So we've got all these user groups out there. And I think we can have some good rules surrounding this stuff that provides for both trapping and other recreational uses, much like we do with our bear bait. We've got in the rule now that you can't put a bear bait station right by a recreational site. You've got to get off the trail so far. And I think you could do a very similar type of rule for the snares where you've got these high use areas like Bonneville Shoreline Trail and some other areas where it's just not a compatible use. So I think there's room to have a little bit more nuance in what we're looking at for this rule.
I would agree. I also think that we can't look at success rate on this too, because that's how like in the last RAC meeting, we talked about the archery elk tag was a 0% success rate. Well, we're not going to do away with that, even though it's a 0% success rate. And so even though that we're not taking many cats due to lethal snares, I don't think we do away with it just because of the success rate of something.
No, but I think it goes to the balance, the public safety, the safety of the animals,
the
lion, dogs.
Right.
With the public safety, my question on the public safety, what trumps taking away one person's right in terms of a public safety? And is it a public safety of, when I think public safety, I'm thinking public safety of if it's humans getting caught in these things, right? And we got people dying, that's one thing. And I understand. I got my own dogs. Every time I go out, they were mentioning people chucker hunt. Yep, that is my go when big game's over, is I'm out chasing chuckers with my dogs. And I've had a couple moments where I've had a few Parker moments, and I know if I show up home, I'm in for a lashing from the wife and the kids because my dog's got a little beat up. But I also know, and my family knows, every time I go out there that's at risk. But a pet should never, in my opinion, be the definition of a public safety. A human that's just where I fall in the public safety. We know as a pet owner, any animal on the landscape, animals die in all sorts of different ways and bad ways. I know whether I take my dogs and I've got them on leash and I'm walking down the bike path, that there's a risk. I know if I take my dogs out chucker hunting, if I take them pheasant hunting, if I take them camping, anytime I go somewhere, there's a risk. And frankly, that risk doesn't just extend to my pets. That risk extends to us as humans. I cannot regulate and change everything to eliminate all the risks that we have. And this is one of those moments where, again, the comment was made, are we making a broader issue out of something that really doesn't exist? Yes, small number of lions. It's a small number of pets. And again, we know that risk going into it. If you don't want to take that risk, I'm saying take the traps out of it. Doesn't matter what happens. When I step out into those mountains, that risk is there. And I know that, and I take that, and I let my dogs do it because it's what they love. It's what they're bred to do, and it's what they do. So that's where I thought I have a hard time. It's taken away. I feel like it's putting one group against the other. It's to a certain degree, it would be like getting into other hunting of, well, like rifle hunters against a muzzleloader and a traditional archer against a compound. And that's, I think there definitely has been discussed some opportunities and some protections and some things that could be done. But I think to do a complete all or none, I think there's some opportunity missed. So I don't think, and Chad, I tell you, I appreciate you. I will say this, I don't think they go into any of these things and make these decisions. The division and many people, I appreciate all of you men and women that put in your time and your efforts. I don't think you guys ever go into anything trying to make a bad decision or trying to impact one group or the other. There's good intentions behind it. I feel bad for you, Chad, because I feel like you were supposed to get away from these things, moving away from the CWMU, and now you stepped into the predator. But I appreciate you guys. I understand. I can understand that, hey, it looks like a minor, but yeah, I don't think this sits well. I think there's more conversation that needs to be had. I think there's more opportunity with
And I appreciate that opportunity, but your comments and others have drawn me right back to my other question. Let me ask it a different way. It may help elucidate what's concerning me. If this were to pass, would there still be traps on public land to snare lions of any kind, non-lethal?
No, not for lions, but you got fox, coyote.
So there's not
snares.
a non-lethal trap that can secure lions. It has to be lethal.
No, there's footholds that would still be legal.
So why isn't that available? Because a lot of the discussion that I've heard here is we're stopping trapping altogether. That isn't how I understood it.
No. So
That's what I've heard.
Robert, snares are so much easier to carry. They don't freeze in the ground. They don't lock up like a foothold does in the northern Utah, in any part of Utah. But I trapped this winter, and I use snares. I have footholds, but I went to snares because they're so much easier to set. And
so it's
have
the
them to
ease of
stay
setting the snare
and have them to stay working. Foothold, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to pull a foothold and put a stick in it and it won't go off.
Okay.
I'm going to answer it a little different way. And I appreciate it. But I come back to okay, I can go kill a deer or an elk with a rifle, but now I'm going to tell them I can't go kill them with a muzzleloader. I can go or a bow. It's again, I get might be a little bit extreme, but I'm limiting a lethal. Someone made a comment about is a fair chase. I don't. To me, I think it's completely fair chase.
To
Again,
me, the
it's
analogy is not accurate for the reason that you have now on the trapping superimposed. And I think it is a public safety, whether it's your animal, whether it's you. There's an element of that. There's not an element of that with your shooting the deer unless somebody's just being negligent and careless. I don't think that's a correct analogy.
Go ahead.
Well, so if this were to pass, my understanding is that it really doesn't solve the problem of pet safety, because there's still going to be bobcat snares on the landscape. There's still going to be coyote snares on the landscape. There's still going to be fox snares on this landscape. So this looks to me like an aggressive ploy to whittle away at trapping using pets as an emotional tool.
And somebody may be having that in their mind. I don't, so that you're clear. And I understand some may feel that way. I don't. But I think there's a balancing here. And what we're not totally doing, in my view, is balancing two things. And that's why I don't think the other analogy works of just shooting.
And I don't think passing this would balance what's being put forward.
You come down on the other side of the balance. I understand that. I respect that.
Right. I mean, I wish we had more information on, if you look at it face value of what was said today, it's 7 versus 11, right? 7 lions killed a year. I don't know how long the 11 hounds were, but how long that time was. But I wish we had more information prior to 3 years ago. How many hounds were caught before 3 years ago? Or is this just recently become a problem because of the lion being able to snare lions? And that's,
Fair question.
and I don't know if this is going to solve that. Are we still going to have 11 hounds be caught in coyote and bobcat sets and an incidental lion catch? I don't know if that fixes it with passing this. I think there needs to be more time put into it and more investigation into specific individual cases where we can come with more information to see if it is lion sets that's doing it, or is it trappers that are trapping for coyote and bobcat and incidentally catching that hound as well.
Because if it is a safety issue, probably really need to address snares in general, not only snares for lions.
Well, again, I don't think you have to have complete solutions.
Yeah, I don't want
This
to
is
see
a
a
partial solution.
I don't want to see any type
I'm
of
on the
trap.
different end of the balance, but that's okay.
Sorry, Robert. I don't want to see any trap off of a heavily used trail. Not a coyote trap, not a fox trap, big zero. So I think a committee ought to be put together and table this.
I think there's a lot that goes to both sides. If I remember right from the comments from the houndsman, it sounds like very little issue with snares, hounds in snares prior to the passing of the bill. Which sort of lends a little bit to what Brandon, I think, we talked about, and where I start to come down on that side of it is they've been on the landscape for far more than the last 3 years, done successfully with more limited, if you want to call it, safety concerns. So from that side of it, can we take the education part from the government trappers and the ones who have that and begin to transfer that over into whether it's an ethics course, whether it's a training course? But I don't think taking the banning of the snares, I don't think is the right approach, because once you take the tool off the table, then we don't have the ability to use it in different ways or to self-regulate. We can put regulations on it. It shouldn't be a free-for-all either. But heard some of the comments and heard it here tonight, and that's fine of being able to take management back kind of away from the legislature, quite frankly. And in opportunities where we can do that, I would agree. Taking it back and then banning it isn't bringing management strategy back. It's just banning it. And so if we can bring it back and then put together a committee or a working group or whatever to look at all the options of what could some regulations look like to help try and address some of these safety concerns on the public side, I think is completely viable. We've done this many times with good success on a lot of species. It's just once you ban it, it's over and we don't really have that option. And so I fall to that side of, I don't support banning it, but I do support coming down on that side of working towards some sort of a committee, work towards some solutions, whether it's on the education side to help address some of the public safety concerns, whether it can be from houndsmen and other things. Bring in a government trapper, let him work on some of that education piece and see if we can get some strategies that maybe don't have quite as much of an effect on hounds as they did in the past.
Yeah, and I say bring the Utah Trappers Association in on that too. I've ran hounds for 35 years right alongside the trappers, the true trappers, not the startup ones. We've been caught once by a snare in 35 years. So there's a difference between somebody setting a foothold or a snare right off of a busy trail versus Utah Trappers Association trappers.
Okay, any other discussion from the RAC?
I'll make a motion if you're ready.
Yeah, we'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we reject this offer as is and ask the division to come back after they've formed a committee and have that committee consist of stakeholders that include both the Utah Houndsmen Association, the Utah Trappers Association, and any other organizations they feel would be appropriate for this, and have them come up with some recommendations that we can get behind. That's not just shallow data that doesn't really mean anything. Let's find some real solutions to potential problems and something that our stakeholders can get behind.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Brandon, seconded by Steve to reject the division's proposal and instruct the division to form a committee to evaluate effective trapping regulations. Is that a fair statement? Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we need to add like areas that they can use snares, like not along the Wasatch Front if we're worried about pets?
Part
I
of
think
what the
that's-
committee-
That'll be in the committee. They can go over all that.
Could be the
Yeah.
purview of the division and the committee, what they want to look at.
I think it's covered in your motion, but yeah, make sure we get kind of other user groups in there as well.
I've been on a lot of committees and the division does a really good job with diverse committees.
Okay, with that, we'll call for a vote. Raise your hands. Okay, any opposed?
I like the motion in many ways, but I would still support what the division is doing for what you said.
Okay. I did not, I can't do math that fast. Hang on, 1, 2, 3. All right, motion passes 11-1. All right, thank you. Thanks, Chad. Darren, I'm pretty sure that Chad would trade you places and offer you a lot of money to take your spot again.
Chad's got some really bad timing. Don't go to Vegas and don't buy a lot of tickets.
All right. Agenda item number 10, R657-28, use of division land rules with Chelsea Duke.
Y'all are tall. Jeez. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. So I will just give you a quick refresh. You might remember I was here last year this time when the legislature passed House Bill 309. And that required that everyone visiting a wildlife management area or a waterfowl management area in a first or second class county would be required to have a hunting or a fishing license to access that property. The legislature heard a lot from the public. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. They heard a lot from the public and came back with House Bill 30 this year, which was passed and is going to become effective July 1st. In that bill, the Wildlife Board was asked to look at 7 different things and come with rule recommendations for those 7 items. And that's what I outlined in the rule recommendations and the proposal. So happy to answer questions.
Okay, we'll start off with any questions from RAC members.
So there's no financial contribution now for non-hunters visiting wildlife management areas?
That's correct. So the digital access permit is going to be free of charge. You'll have to watch an educational video, acknowledge a statement about access being limited, and then you will be asked to provide a contribution, but that's an optional donation. But we are required to ask for a contribution that could be made to WMAs in general or to specific WMAs. But the digital access permit is free.
Where did the decision come from to just have a digital access permit and video instead of requiring some kind of access fee permit that's actually goes towards maintaining those WMAs?
The Utah legislature.
So we went from one extreme to another extreme.
Is that a question?
Are those, what are those the donated monies, is that earmarked for specific projects in the WMAs? I mean, how does that get allocated?
Yeah, so I can read what the law says. We have very specific standards of what that money can be used for. So let me find it for you here. The division may use money in the fund to provide for habitat restoration and protection, trail maintenance and development, and volunteer support and coordination.
Understand, Chelsea, that this is not your recommendation, but this is a bad thing for wildlife. I was so excited for people to be charged and for using our WMAs that hunters pay for. And to see this happen, that's a slap in the face, in my opinion.
Is there any room for a per vehicle parking fee?
Not the way that the legislation is written.
So in other words, it just is what it is that the legislature passed. Even if we're talking about it, there's really nothing to talk about.
House Bill 30 was very narrow, and the board was given authorization to do these 7 things that I'm presenting to you today.
Well, it's
So
interesting that we can manage and have permit fees for, every other state and federal, lands and access that we go to, but it just, again, I didn't agree with what was originally done last year. I thought that was poorly done. Hence why we have racks and boards and the way it should go through the system. And instead we have some folks that think that it's their job to legislate and represent the sportsmen and the hunters. And I sure, as we've been mentioned, love to see it come back to the right processes. So I appreciate everything you're doing and just what you're allowed to do. So
the wildlife board can do nothing about this either. Like if we're to, it's just kind of cut and dry, right?
So the law is very straightforward that there are now only 2 options to access a wildlife or waterfowl management area. That is to purchase a hunting, fishing, or combination license or obtain a free digital access permit.
This is a big loss for wildlife because, between the PR money we would have got from these fees, sportsman's dollars, etc. I say we move on.
All right. Any other questions? Any questions from the public?
Is this informational, Chelsea?
No.
We don't have a
Still need
choice.
you to
on it.
prove more
It's not
law.
informational,
Can we
But we
talk,
got to vote on.
Yeah.
can we talk about the rest of the rule that this is part of?
The rest of the rule that it's a part
The
of?
lands rule?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's this rule is now open. This is, I didn't redline any other portion of the rule, but you're welcome to make any recommendations about the rule as a whole.
I guess I just had some questions kind of relative to the lands rule and the WMA management plans. And in the plans, there's some things about vegetation and habitat management goals, but there's really no specifics about what those need to be or how they're defined. Like with Forest Service on our lands for grazing, we've got pretty specific goals of what we're trying to get the habitat to and what those standards are. And we've got our annual operating plans that specify on dates, off dates, pastures, rotations, rest years, utilization. So we've got something to look at and actually know what we're trying to get to. We don't always get there, but we at least have something to measure by. Is there anything in the lands rule that would have kind of specified any of those specifics going into the wildlife plans or the WMA plans?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to clarify. So the portion of the rule that I think you're referring to is R657-28, section 3, and this is management of division lands. You'll see that this is a really sparse section because habitat management plans are also overseen by code. So there's official Utah legislation that oversees and says how we are to go through this habitat management plan process. It's very specific on what shall be included in the plan, who is involved in the creation of those plans, and how those plans are carried out. So there's not a lot in rule because it's already covered in code.
Those things are not in the plans either.
That's in
The specifics of how the property's managed as far as vegetation and desired end state.
I will say that we are still playing a little bit of catch up with habitat management plans. If you guys have seen other blog posts of mine or other things, we have been purchasing properties since 1901. This law did not go into effect. It was recodified and renumbered in 2023. So there was an iteration of it beforehand, but a lot of our plans are very old and we are in compliance, but they haven't been updated. We are moving through that process to make sure all wildlife management areas have plans and then going back and revising older plans that may not be as up to date. So I would hope that we're capturing what you're requesting in our newer plans.
The plans that were part of our RAC tonight, the informational plans, did they have the information in them that you were looking for?
No.
I I have to agree, like there's a plan with no plan is like kind of the.
Aren't these gone through in the Habitat Council?
Correct. Yes, they are. That's part of the
Habitat
code.
Council looks at all these and clears them. That's their job, I believe. I know.
So from the BLM standpoint, I would also agree with Avery. And I know I was going to comment later when like the Woodruff plan was presented that, yeah, I mean, we co-manage the Woodruff co-op with DWR, and we really would love to see more specific objectives for the wildlife, but also we use grazing as a tool there and specific objectives that can be measured and they're science-based. And honestly, I appreciate that all the work that's going into the plans, but it is lacking a little teeth, and that's a new plan. So that I appreciate you bringing it up, Avery, even though it's not an agenda item. I hope that we can talk further about it in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you both for that feedback. We can absolutely go back and look at this section. We, of course, can't do anything that contradicts code, but we can add to it. So happy to look at that.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
I guess one other question on availability of the plans. How do you access them? They're very hard to find.
Yes, it can be a bit of a tangle to find the habitat management plans. If you go to our website, we have a WMA landing page, and then after there's a big list of all of our WMAs. That's a at-a-glance view of access, whether or not you need the license or now this digital access permit. And then right below that, there's a link to a map. And that map shows all of our wildlife and waterfowl management areas. And if there is a plan for the property, it's available on that map. All you have to do is just click and find your property, and then you can find the habitat management plan. I'd be happy to show it to you.
I think I was almost there, looking at the list and didn't find the plans.
It's just a little bit below that.
Keep going, Avery.
Yeah.
It's a long list, so I get it.
Okay. I forgot where, did I summarize public comments? Did we have any? Okay.
Yes, Chelsea did have one public comment. It was someone who was neutral, and it was, excuse me, it was from a senior who wanted to be able to have a lifetime pass and not have to do the course.
Sure.
A hunting license or a fishing license will still be considered a pass, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so those are, remember, there's two options: hunting, fishing, or combo, or the free digital access permit. With the digital access permit, because the legislation required that we also allow a person who gets a digital access permit to fish with that digital access permit if they have contributed an amount equal to or greater than a fishing license in the state of Utah, we have to allow them to fish with that digital access permit. So it only makes sense for us to do a 365-day permit because it's tied to a fishing license, if that made sense.
So, all right, so they get a digital access permit.
Yes.
Gives them a fishing license.
If you donate,
They have to donate the amount of a fishing license, so $41.
it doesn't give you a fishing license. We have to let you fish with that permit.
Okay, so I'll ask the next question. On matching PR dollars, do we get to count that as a license sale? Oh, perfect. Okay.
How does that, just for those that have to enforce the people out there fishing, how in the world can they verify if somebody that has an access, WMA access, it legally now qualifies to fish without any, do they have a way to verify they donated enough?
This is why we're proposing it be 365 days, because our licensing staff are working very diligently right now to implement this in July 1, and it will denote on your digital access permit if you qualify for that fishing requirement.
Does this renew like every 3 years, or once it's in law, it's just there until there's an issue? Or is it like some of these other things, it's on a 3-year plan? Or
This
is
is a
it
state law passed
so
by the
it's-
legislature.
Okay, so it's just until it needs
some adjustment.
Correct.
Really, all you're doing is just trying to apply some rules to the legislation that you're bound by.
Yes, please.
Trying to clarify in the way they can, so, okay. All right, any other discussion, and we'll entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the division's recommendation as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, you got a motion by Robert, seconded by Brandon to accept as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote, raise your hands. Okay, any opposed? Okay. That's, motion passes 11-1. You want to state any reason why you're opposed?
Just sounds like nobody likes what was going on there.
You didn't have a choice there. I know I don't have a choice.
Just don't like the legislature. Thank you, Chelsea. All right. Okay,
I
agenda
think all you guys did that very well.
number 11, R657-75, wildlife consultation procedure for renewable energy facilities with Daniel Olson.
Yeah, is it okay if I provide a little background summary
Sure.
on this? Okay.
Yeah.
So this one's a little different than our normal agenda items. There were two House bills passed this legislative session that require utility scale solar and wind projects to consult with DWR. And one of the bills requires DWR to create an administrative rule on how that consultation process happens. So my presentation kind of laid out the process that we are proposing for that consultation process. We don't get to approve or deny projects. We weren't given that legislative authority. We're just required to consult with companies on these projects. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
On that consulting, like, again, one of those kind of broad vague, like what does can you consult and you give them, but are they required to follow any of those recommendations that you guys come up with that is specifically impact like wildlife and stuff? Like
Yeah, so great question. Kind of how the process would work is the company will explain the kind of the footprint, where the project's going to happen, what infrastructure they're going to have, and then we can identify what species are there, what possible impacts might occur, and then give them some suggestions on how they might mitigate impacts to wildlife when they're building these facilities. They're not required to apply those mitigation measures. They are required to, when they're applying for permitting, they have to show proof that they consulted with DWR on their project. And they have to have some kind of description of how they're going to apply those recommendations to their project. And when they go to the county to get their permits for these projects, the county is required to consider these wildlife recommendations. They still have the option to approve or deny the project, but they just have to consider it in the process. Does that help answer your question, Ross? Or
no, yeah, it answers
okay.
The question. Just leave some holes that didn't get covered. It's kind of a token process, but anyways.
Daniel, when they passed this, did they put any funds towards it?
No, we didn't get any additional funds for this.
A common thing I keep seeing is the legislatures keep passing stuff and giving you guys more and more things to do with no help money. You know, I've been involved with the division for over 20 years, and from the sidelines, you guys are overworked, underpaid, and understaffed. I think your liaison of the legislatures should bring this up because it's tiring to see more stuff put on your guys' plate.
I appreciate that comment, Steve. We do have an impact analysis program already built into DWR right now that's funded. So we have 5 impact analysis biologists, 1 in each region. And then I help coordinate the program. We are getting very busy though. There are a lot of projects happening in the state, development projects, and they're getting larger in scale, which means more time to evaluate them and work through issues. So that's a good comment.
This isn't a question, but I'm going to say it anyway. The legislature could have just assessed a fee for the developers to pay for this consultation based on the scale and solve this problem really easy.
What would be the procedure within the division if an applicant simply didn't follow the recommendation, maybe substantially didn't follow the recommendation, and it, in the division's opinion, would have a really adverse effect because they're not? What within the division, how do you make that determination? Who makes that determination? Whether you basically appear before the licensor and recommend a denial of the license?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's really going to fall on whoever's issuing the permit to decide whether that use is going to be appropriate or not, and whether the trade-offs are worth it.
That would be the ultimate. What I'm asking
Yeah.
though specifically for the division to weigh in before who approves the licensing. What's the procedure within the division to be able to do that, or is there a provision for that within your division? I know it's not in the law.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you
Probably
rephrase?
not a very good question, but I'm going to still ask.
No, I
it.
like your
Still
question
know
because
what I want.
were they just wasting their time?
Is there a
Within the
way,
developer?
is there a way within, I mean, the division, I would think, can be vocal. The division can say, we laid out what we think is a very reasonable approach. There may be other ways to do it, but they're not even substantially following it or doing anything to try to ameliorate any problem. They're just not trying to do that. I would hope the division could appear before whoever authorizes that license and maybe urge a denial of that license.
He's basically saying like, if you said, okay, you're gonna have solar panels across this 40 acres or 400 acres, we want you to leave a path for deer migration that we know happens here. What if they don't?
Yeah, so we do, we will present at like county commission meetings or county planning meetings.
So you would appear and make your
Yeah.
argument for that.
But if the process works the way it's intended, the county would see our recommendations when the company's applying for their permit, so they would know, have an idea that there might be major impacts and what could be done to offset that. And then the company could explain whether they're going to do those things or not do them, or to what degree.
Because that's probably the only leverage you have in
Right.
the existing law.
Right.
To keep people hopefully follow closely those recommendations.
Jessica?
Yeah, Daniel, is there a previous rule or law that applies to non-renewable projects? Or is this just focused on renewable projects?
This one's just renewable, Jessica. Yeah.
So there's plenty of things that could affect wildlife that you have no say.
Yeah.
So that makes very little sense to me.
We do, so we comment on all types of impacts and learn about them in different ways. And a lot of times the companies are very good about reaching out to us and trying to work with us to understand what they can do. And we do provide comment letters on oil and gas leases and housing developments and all kinds of issues. So kind of runs the gamut of issues. But yeah, as a specific requirement to consult with this one's just renewable energy projects, and specifically just wind and solar utility sized projects.
Would the output of this consultation be substantially different than your standard impact analysis letters?
I think it'll be very, very similar, Avery. So yeah, similar type of recommendations as we have if a company just reached out to us on their own to ask for help.
Any other questions? Okay. We have, any questions from the public? Okay. Did we have public comments on this one? All right. Okay. No public comment cards, so any RAC discussion or entertain a motion?
I assume this is much the same as the last, where it's just implementing legislation, so there's really not much of a choice here.
Appears to be, but yeah.
Pretty much what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Appreciate you doing what you can within it. You guys are giving dealt a losing hand to start.
Anyone entertain a motion?
In the interest of getting home, I make a motion that we presented accept as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ryan, seconded by Ross to accept as presented. Any discussion on the motion?
We're still getting burgers, right?
We're not done yet. All right, we'll call for a vote. Raise your hands. Okay, motion passes unanimous. All right, thank you. Oh, you didn't? Okay. Any opposed? Motion passes 11-1. Do you want to state your reason?
Reason, same reason as Garrett last time.
Okay. All right, agenda item number 12, white sturgeon introduction and regulations with Craig Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a brief recap of what was presented to you earlier, our presentation outlined the proposed introduction of white sturgeon to 2 waters in Utah, Grantsville Reservoir in Tooele County, and Hobbs Reservoir in Davis County, which you're probably more concerned with. We're seeking board approval of a catch and release regulation for white sturgeon in both of those waters. This proposed introduction is part of a broader effort to increase angler opportunity, as I described during last year's informational. And hopefully you guys are willing to entertain it quickly. Now, I'm ready to field any questions you got for me.
I'm so glad you were last to uplift us with this. This is awesome. I love
Well,
seeing it.
it was a legislatively mandated introduction of white sturgeon. Okay.
You want to take that comment back, Steve?
That's a good one. No, I think this is awesome. You know, I've heard different things talked about the hone cutthroat coming in, and I love seeing this. This is awesome. More opportunity, different species, and I'm sure you guys have assessed the risk, because I know there is some risk with this.
Yeah, so we white sturgeon have been in the state for about 3 years. They were brought in by a private producer down in Beaver, and that's actually where we'll be getting these fish from. And at that time, the understanding was that those fish were going to start to hit waters in private ponds. And for that reason, we wanted to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row as far as the potential impacts of having this species in the state. So we conducted probably a 1-year-long review of that species at that time. We still would like to, assuming that the board approves the regulation that we propose and that we're still able to secure these fish, we still want to undergo an internal review, as I mentioned in the presentation, just to give one more quick look and dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's. But yeah, this is something where we view these 2 waters as really laboratories for us to examine whether or not we can successfully manage with this species. Even some of these small, what we would term fringe waters, not quite community waters, bigger than community waters, but not quite Lake Powell or Fleming Gorge. You know, it allows us to have one more tool in our toolbox. Whether the Lahontons are something that we're going to pursue in the future, or if it's some other species of catfish, or if it's sawguy or sauger, we're definitely open to looking at new opportunities to diversify our fisheries and address some of the issues we're encountering this year, whether that be warm water, low water, whatever it is.
I didn't recognize the places you were going to put them. What's the downstream or upstream risk?
That was the key thing in both waters. The escapement risk was 0. So that's kind of where we had, we put this out to the regional managers. Chris Penny, the Northern Regional Manager in our aquatic section, and Chris Crockett put forward waters. From those waters, we kind of sifted them down to 2 because we only have 100 fish that we're securing, and felt that we could put 50 in each and treat them as laboratories safely without that escapement risk.
Cool. I know they're not going to get very big, you said so, in a reservoir, but how big will they get?
So, you know, Ken Strong and I have had this back and forth. In a hatchery environment, they can grow large because you're putting the feed to them. You've got the optimal conditions to actually rear them up. And I think that's what he's witnessing when he meets with that grower down in Beaver. In the wild, we're looking at growth rates until they achieve 20 inches of probably 4 inches a year. And then after that, growth slows and they put on 2 inches a year, which is really interesting. Those are in optimal conditions, right? So when you see those 20-foot long behemoths in the basins up north, Snake and Columbia, those are fish that have been around a while, right? That's why people are so protective of those. We anticipate these getting probably the size of a large cutthroat trout. Again, we're not in it for the giant fish. It's just a diversification of the opportunity.
And how long you think they live in these reservoirs?
That's why we're
You're not sure.
examining them. We don't know what they'll do in these water bodies. Hobbs is a little cooler than Grantsville. If we hit upper lethal temperatures, there's going to be an issue with mortality for sure. But our hope is that there's not, which is why we have a catch and release, because we're actually wanting them to persist until we are able to see whether or not they can achieve desirable sizes.
Are they sterile?
No, these are not sterile, but they do not reach sexual maturity until they're 25. And also they would require flowing water and large rivers to actually successfully reproduce. So in their native environment, they migrate from marine to estuary to freshwater within their life history.
I know in Idaho, like you can't pull them out of the water. Do we have any regulations on the books, or will there be any of not pulling them out of the water? Or is that?
I don't think so. I don't think we're in the conservation mode to that degree. We do want to have a catch and release to make sure that they do persist, and there's limited mortality as far as harvest goes. But at the same time, we're not looking to, we're not expecting having to curate them for 100 years, which is I think what they're trying to do in those bigger systems where they can grow them to be 18 feet long.
Gotcha. One more question. How old do they live in the wild?
100 years.
100 years.
Older than any of us are going to be.
Okay, any other questions?
Not as old as Ken, though.
Just sitting there minding his own business.
Yeah. All right, any questions from the public? Okay, no, we didn't have any public comments on this one. We did have one public comment card, Ken Strong.
Ken Strong, representing Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife, and I'd like to thank the division for thinking out of the box, trying something new, and they are looking at a lot of different things. I think Utah has the #1 fishing place in the West, probably in the United States. We have a little slower growing rate because of the coldness of the water. The only thing we have to get the fish is if we can continue to get water. That's the biggest problem. But I'd like to thank the division for thinking outside of the box and being willing to look at some of this stuff. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, bring it back for RAC discussion.
I'll make a motion if we're ready.
I just got to say one thing. I got to thank the division for bringing one more thing that I still need to go outside of the state if I ever want it in my life, and that's the sturgeon along with a moose. It's just one more thing I'll never get here, so I just won't live long enough to catch a big one.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to accept it as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Ross, seconded by Steve to accept the white sturgeon introduction and regulations as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote, raise your hands. Okay, motion passes unanimous. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, we have 2 informational items. These are on WMA habitat management plans. The first one is East Canyon with Melissa Early.
Hi. So we updated the 2015 East Canyon Habitat Management Plan. The division acquired a new acreage, also in coordination with state parks. And so we updated the plan to encompass the new parcel known as the Golden Hills Acquisition. And this was presented at Habitat Council on April 29th. And we'll be going out to the RDCC database next week for public comment. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Oh, actually, one point of clarification. At Habitat Council, we received a comment about if you have a limited entry turkey tag or late season elk tag. And so I added a sentence to clarify that if you have one of those tags, then you have the valid permit to go into the WMA, say for turkey mid-April, because the WMA's winter closure was extended to May 1st to protect big game. So your tag means you're valid to go in there.
Okay, this is informational item. So any questions for?
Is that all WMAs or just that one?
That was all WMAs.
May 1st?
No, I thought you were asking about the turkey tag. Okay. No, May 1st for East Canyon, it was extended to that closure date, just because of the heavy winter of the past was really challenging for the big game herds. And so that was a committee recommendation with DWR supporting it.
Any other questions? Any comments from RAC members on this one? Okay, thank you, Melissa.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one is the Woodruff Co-op WMA Habitat Management Plan with Brad Hunt.
Yeah, I'm here online. Thanks for having me. We presented the Woodruff Habitat Co-op plan to our Habitat Council on April 29th. This is a unique property where we work with multiple landowners, BLM and TLA, to cooperatively manage this one. And so, yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's been something that's been worked on for about 10 years. And so we're happy to see it approaching the end. It has been posted to the RDCC database. I want to say last week or the first part of this week, it was made available on the database. So we're still waiting comments from the Habitat Council and comments through RDCC.
Okay. Any questions from the RAC on Woodruff?
Hey Brad, it's Jessica from the BLM.
Hey.
Thank you for all your work and coordination. You know, BLM and DWR are very strong partners and we do so much work together. You probably heard my earlier comments. So we would just really look forward to coordinating more on this one in the near future before it gets finalized.
Yeah, sure thing. We're happy to sit down and address any comments or concerns you guys may still have with it.
Great, thanks, Brad.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments from RAC members? Okay. Thank you, Brad.
You betcha.
Okay, and that finishes up our agenda for the night. Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion so made.
So moved. Thank you.